Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Soul Chess in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 101, Zaraki Kenpeiki's Epic Rematch. Third-person POV. With a maddening cry, Kenpeiki struck forward towards his Zanpakuto, clashing blades with the bearded spirit's sword. The resulting clash sent a blast of ryotsu everywhere, kicking up dust and forming a crater beneath the two combatants. Both fighters drew back their blades and bashed them against each other time and again, each trying to gain an advantage over the other combatant. I'm gonna try a new tactic, Kenpeiki thought to himself. It's not my usual way of fighting, but it just might work so that by the time he hits level 5, we'll still be even. Fumetsu Seishin no Senso and Kenpeiki continued to clash blades, with Kenpeiki continually bashing his sword against his opponents, like he wasn't even trying to look for an opening. Starting to find the whole ordeal annoying, Fumetsu Seishin no Senso took a swing at the division captain. Much to his amazement, Kenpeiki, rather than letting it cut him, sidestepped the attack and swung up and outward. Fumetsu dodged, but Kenpeiki followed suit and attacked again with a downward strike. Fumetsu dodged again and Kenpeiki slammed deep into the ground. Fumetsu slashed horizontally to try and cut Kenpeiki at the eye line, but Kenpeiki ducked underneath the swing, did a backflip, rushed forward and swung wide, slashing his Zanpakuto right in the waist. He performed another diagonal slash and just managed to nick his Zanpakuto in the right shoulder before it drew away from the strike. Well, how do you like that? I may actually win this thing, Kenpeiki chuckled. Don't get cocky just because you managed to wound me and are still untouched. We've clashed enough that I've started to rise again. Fumetsu showed Kenpeiki the yellow flame overtaking the green one. Fine by me, I liked your level 3 form, we were even at that point. It was fun, Kenpeiki grinned. Well, alright then, Fumetsu said with a faint grin and watched as the yellow flame completely overtook the green flame along his blade, level 3. At this same time, Susanoo was locked in combat with Kyokaku, Momo, and Rangiku simultaneously and, surprisingly, holding her own. Susanoo, of course, was currently the only one using Shikai. The others were hesitant to inflict excessive damage on her. After all, she was still their friend. She may have switched sides, but they still wanted to believe that she and Lelouch had their reasons. Susanoo-san, why are you doing this? Momo asked her. Because it's the right thing to do, Susanoo said coldly as she held her palm up with lightning sparking in it. I'll follow Lelouch Dano wherever he may go. It's as simple as that. She sent out a high-powered lightning bolt at Momo at the speed the element travels and shocked her with over 4 times the amount of a normal one. Susanoo of course not only aimed for Momo, but also her sword. Momo screamed as her senses were shocked and dropped to her knees and let go of Tabayum. The fact that Susanoo was capable of such power wasn't what bothered Rangiku and Kyokaku. It was what she did next. Susanoo laughed, and it wasn't a laugh like a person laughs when they laugh at a joke. It was the type of laugh that an aristocrat would exude in taking satanic delight at the misfortune of peasants or other they considered beneath them. To add to the effect, Susanoo curled the fingers of her right hand and held her hand underneath her bottom lip as she laughed. Susanoo! Rangiku shouted in anger. What's wrong, Rangiku? Susanoo smiled with a sneer. I'm your enemy now. Yes, but you've never been like this. Even on the Phantoms you didn't. Rangiku was trying to say how Susanoo never took pleasure in the pain of an enemy, indifference perhaps, anger maybe, but never the happy, delightfully sadistic smile currently on her face. That was then, this is now, Susanoo said. She wafted her hands up, creating 2 small twisters sparking with lightning. Juarashi, double tempest, she crossed her hands over each other as if she were skipping rope, and the twisters passed each other, honing in on Rangiku and Kyokaku. Heido 58, Tenran. Kyokaku wasn't particularly good at that particular Kido without the spirit chant, so the gust wasn't nearly powerful enough to stop the approaching storm, but it was enough for her to slip past the gap in between them and try to punch Susanoo in the face. Explode with intensity, Kyode Bakuden. Much to her amazement, Susanoo blocked her with her bare hand, lightning sparking in her palm. Silly Kyokaku, she laughed, not even bothering with honorifics. You may have Shikai, but you're nowhere near the level of a vice captain. Reikoho. She blasted Kyokaku right in the chest and sent her flying back and crashing straight into a wall. Kyokaku stood up, uniform torn by her abdomen, blood pouring out from it from a burn 4 inches deep. Susanna floated in front of her, levitating off the ground, smirking with that same prideful sneer as before. Kyokaka wiped her lip as a little bit of blood dripped from it. She may be powerful, but I know one way to break her spirit. You know it's no wonder you'd follow Lelich and betray us all, Kyokaka grimaced, you creepy-looking bitch. It was the ultimate taunt against Susanna, calling her creepy. The girl was very conscious of her appearance. She became very withdrawn, sometimes cried, when someone called her out on it. Susanna's real anger button was being called a slut or something similar, but to call her creepy, or strange, or a freak, because of her appearance, usually had the opposite effect. Not this time though. Instead of sniveling or backing down, Susanna became furious, scowling fiercely and spoke bitterly. Inazuma Hashira. Lightning pillar. From beneath Kyokaku's feet a bright yellow glow appeared and the next thing she knew a pillar of lightning erupted beneath her, shocking her to her very core with more. It hurt a lot. Even someone with high pain tolerance like Kyokaku had to scream in agony from the shock. The pillar stopped and Kyokaku dropped to the ground. Susanna glanced backward at Rangiku, with Momo still under her arm, but recovering. Next? Susanna asked. While Rangiku debated upon engaging Susanna in battle, Stefan continued to fight his Zanpakuto Yajokokyo. The bestial spirit tore towards Stefan with his claws, trying to hit the speedy captain. Stefan was dodging with ease. As I thought, Stefan exclaimed with pride, you might have my skill, but not the speed I naturally possess. You may be fast, but I am faster. Yajokokyo simply growled and increased the speed of his attacks, but Stefan continued to dodge and then amazingly slashed the beast across the waist and Flash stepped behind, performing a 180 and slashing his back. He whirled his Zanpakuto into the creature, popped it into the air and brought it down to the ground with an overhead slash. As Yajokokyo bounced off the ground, Stefan struck with a combination of spinning kicks and sword strikes, allocating 7 complete strikes, continually passing his blade under his leg, striking as if he were dancing. Popping the beast into the air yet again, Stefan followed up into the air with a 4-hit attack and then let Yajokokyo crash into the ground as he stood his. He then rushed forward and slashed Yajokokyo hard across the side of the beast's abdomen before turning around and flipping forward with an overhead swing, cutting down the creature's back before making a sweeping slice upward before making several fierce slashes at Yajokokyo's back. Then, focusing his mind, Stefan began darting back and forth through Yajokokyo, slashing him time and again, cutting him from multiple angles, going faster and faster, each slash harder for the beast to even see until the last 4 were a complete blur. Had enough? Stefan asked, blade resting on his shoulder. Yajokokyo started to get to his feet. That was what, 77 hits? I think that's a new record. Yajokokyo was bleeding profusely, staring at his master with his yet undamaged eyes. You've become quite skilled with that blade of yours. Stefan looked inquisitively at his Zanpakuto. When you first learned my name, you were no better skilled at blade work than Zaraki. You resented my power at first, but, look what it has turned you into. I am, Yajokokyo smiled as any beast with piranha teeth could, impressed. Don't give me all the credit, Stefan said solemnly, it's all because you were there, pushing me forward, drilling me. I wanted to gain strength, be skilled. Yuriyuki-sensei taught me much when I was in her squad. When she left, I simply wanted to complete the training she had set me on. Your former captain meant much to your squad, Yajokokyo commented. Stefan smiled softly, she was the best the squad had had thus far, so I had read. And what about you, my master, will you surpass her? Yajokokyo asked. Stefan cocked his head to the side, I don't think anyone has the ability to be better than Yuriyuki-sensei, not in terms of flash step anyway. But, he smiled at his sword, I think I can come close and I can definitely make my mark in the Soul Society as Master of Blade Work. Humph, Yajokokyo grunted with a smile, then I will guide you towards that goal, my master. With a low groan, Yajokokyo keeled over and collapsed before going into Stefan's sword. Stefan massaged the hilt, it's good to have you back, my friend. He said. He put the blade away and then quickly unsheathed, sweeping wide. He glanced at the blade, seeing his reflection upon the polished surface. Yeah, he thought and put the sword away, staring up at the sun with a smile, just not the same without you. Back up in the air, Naomi and her Zanpakuto were exchanging blows in rapid-fire motion that only a shonen fighting series could provide. Kicks, punches, and strikes flew in random directions, clothing damage and hair damage, though only on Naomi, for the latter was abound. Despite your top form, you still fight like an amateur. How appropriate you fight like a novice, Naomi stated. They're the same thing, Yokanene Kaze remarked. No, they're not, Naomi replied. Yes, they are, Yokanene Kaze argued. No, they're not, Naomi insisted. An amateur is someone who has a little bit of experience, but no form. A novice is someone that has neither. Naomi's blade clashed with her weapon's tonfa and the two combatants pushed away from each other. Yokanene Kaze gave Naomi a blank stare. What? What did I say? Naomi asked. Yokanene Kaze gave her a dull look. Hey! He sent out the blade of air towards his master. Hi-ah! With a magnificent backwards flip kick, Naomi suppressed the attack with her own spirit energy. Yokanene Kaze stared in wonder. Onisama said that the separation of Zanpakuto and Soul Reaper weakens both, so Naomi rubbed the back of her head with a nervous smile. I took some super vitamins before coming here, to boost my strength. Yokanene Kaze scowled fiercely. You are cheating then. Naomi gave her Zanpakuto a confident stare, holding her Zanpakuto in the same manner as Yokanene Kaze was his tonfa. I'm an assassin, she replied. Pragmatism is everything. She turned her body and slid her blade into its sheath. What are you doing? Yokanene Kaze asked. Just a little something Kano-senpai taught me, she replied. Iajutsu. Naomi pulled her sword out and quickly pulled it back, but to Yokanene Kaze it looked as if she had only pulled her sword out halfway and put it back. She had done it so fast. A gash appeared along the right side of his abdomen. Naomi smirked with confidence. Guess I still need to work on my aim. This, you've never been able to. Yokanene Kaze was shocked. I told you, I came prepared. The moment you left, I figured we'd clash. I had to do something to even the odds. Kano-senpai was willing to teach me this art. Taiko isn't as proficient at it, Naomi stated. Still, one trick will not save you, Yokanene Kaze declared and rushed in to strike. Naomi used a flash step and dove underneath him and rose above him. She whipped around and aimed at her former partner's back. Heido 33, Sakasui. She missed and the force sent her gliding across the air where Yokanene Kaze waited to strike her. Gaining aerial control, Naomi performed a backflip over his head and prepared to take off his head as she passed over him, but he used his own flash step and disappeared. Naomi used flash step simply to get away from the general area and retreated down to the rooftop towards the ground. She knew it would take Yokanene Kaze a while to figure out her location, and by the time he got a good visual in on her it would be too late. Naomi drew her hands back at her side and pressed her wrists together, creating a cage of sorts with her hands. Spirit of the dragon, claw your way forward and breathe your sacred breath. Mighty sword, take from its power and make it your own. Seas of the damned, waters of blood, unleash your fury upon the hell upon earth. Redeem the soul, bite the hand of holding. A blue ball of energy formed in Naomi's hand. Heaven's rage, hell cries out. It all brings peace. Yokanene Kaze was only now spotting and diving towards Naomi as the blue ball of energy in her hand glowed fiercely and set an azure gleam to the area around her. Heido 88, Hiri Yujikazoku Shintenreiho. With the spirit chant added onto it, the fiercest of all energy blast kidos rocketed towards Yokanene Kaze. The size comparison, when compared to a chant discard 1 by Lelich, or even Tessai, was more than 3 times the diameter and density. What? The jade-garbed spirit gasped before the blast utterly disintegrated him. There was still energy left over even after blasting Yokanene Kaze to smithereens, and the excess energy was nullified as it slammed against the ceiling of the bubble around the Siridi. The gate had been closed for wartime purposes to keep the Rokanga citizens safe after all. Naomi's arms sagged at her side like limp noodles and she panted heavily. I'm going to have to get better at that, she thought to herself. On her narrow, relatively short body, high-level kido, anything above a 75, was particularly draining. It surprised Naomi that she was still standing after using up that much of her spirit energy. She began to feel dizzy as a result and proceeded to fall off the roof she was standing on. Kendra appeared just as let her koi fall into her. Naomi was still conscious, but otherwise exhausted. Her face smacked right into Kendra's chest. "Oni, sama," Naomi said in a voice barely above a whisper. "You did very well, Naomi, rest now," Kendra told her. "May I have a cookie when I wake up?" Naomi asked. Kendra resisted the urge to laugh at Naomi's usual randomness. "Of course," she said. Naomi passed out. At this same time Kenpei was continuing to enjoy his battle with Fumetsu Seishin no Senso. Their swords banged against each other every single second or whiffed each other. Kenpei was still keeping his dodge and counter plan in his head, but he had yet to inflict another strike. "Better be careful, partner, I'm close to ascending again." "Ha! So what?" Kenpei gleefully cried out, "I want you to reach level 5. I crave the challenge and this time I'll be the one who's victorious." Kenpei shouted and took a swipe at Fumetsu's neck, but missed by the hairs on his Zanpakuto's beard. The spirit was still only on level 3, but Kenpei couldn't wait for level 5. There was just something about the battle he felt, something in the air, that felt in his favor. He knew he would win this time. "What did I tell you last time? This is no challenge, Kenpei. Challenges imply that I can lose. I can't." As calmly as ever Fumetsu Seishin no Senso swung vertically at Kenpei. The Ryotsu that followed his swing pushed the spiky-haired captain back along the ground, but Kenpei gleefully charged back forward. He leapt and struck with both hands on his blade at his Zanpakuto, but missed and his Zanpakuto planted the sole of his foot in Kenpei's arm, pushing the Soul Reaper away. Fumetsu charged and Kenpei blocked the incoming sword swing. He saw the orange flames continuing to creep over the yellow one as Fumetsu Seishin no Senso's power began to rise. "Well, here we go, partner, level 4. As Fumetsu Seishin no Senso ascended past his master's own strength, Vera was continuing to fight Chikami Sorai. Unfortunately, the only blood on the red-haired spirit was the dried blood from the start of the battle, while the blood on Vera was fresh. She had been wounded thrice by her Zanpakuto's special attack and once by a standard cut. Vera panted as she stood before her smiling, blood-covered Zanpakuto. Her wounds were jagged and deep. "Vera-chan, you don't look so good," her Zanpakuto said with a cutesy childlike voice, "maybe you should rest easy." She revved up the blade pinwheel on the strangely shaped staff, causing it to make a sound like a dentist's drill combined with a chainsaw. Vera took a few steps back, holding her sword as steady as she could. "Don't run, Vera, I only want to show my care for you by cutting you into tiny pieces. Then I can make cupcakes out of you and eat you, and then we can be one again." "You are sick and twisted," Vera stated. Her Zanpakuto was the only individual she would ever open her mouth to speak to, except for perhaps Lelich. Vera's own childlike voice was in stark contrast to her appearance and she was a bit self-conscious of it, but that's not why she chose to hardly ever speak. Her Zanpakuto giggled like a little schoolgirl, holding her hand to her chin and closing her eyes as she did so, smiling sweetly. She opened them again. "I'm only like this because you deny that you still are this Vera-chan. Come on, let's join forces and kill lots of people. That's what we used to do, we'd get close to people and then cut their heads off and watch the heads rot to skulls, remember?" Chikami Sorai asked. Vera dropped her sword and placed her hands on her ears. She closed her eye and began staring at the ground. She was trying to block out her awful past. "Stop it!" she shouted. I'm not like that anymore. I changed. Come on, Vera-chan, you can't change what you are deep inside." "No one can," her Zanpakuto continued to approach her. No. Vera staggered about, her blood splattering the grass. "Miyako was nice to me. Lelich is nice to me. I have friends. I stopped being a Soul Reaper when I knew how it felt. I picked you up and all I could see was that horrible night and all those horrible nights when I was not on the receiving end." Vera shot back. "I came back, because I did not want to die, but I am done killing others." Vera looked agonizingly at her Zanpakuto, "I hate you." She shouted at her Zanpakuto. The words echoed in Chikami Sorai's ears. Her crimson eyes turned dull. Much like Tensou Zanjutsu's feelings towards Ichigo, Chikami Sorai's were similar towards her master, though much more sick and twisted, plus there was her love for violence. Hate me. Chikami Sorai's lip quivered. No. She shouted angrily, shaking her head fiercely. Vera-chan. Chikami Sorai struck forward with battle-mad fury, signaling Vera to grab her Zanpakuto and run. Chikami Sorai chased Vera through the streets of the Siridi, hot on the girl's heels. Vera was freaking out all the while Chikami Sorai kept calling out to her. Vera-chan. Love me. Love me. She called to her. Vera continued to whine as she fled in fear. She realized the stupidity in what she said, and it was way too late to fix it. She hadn't been thinking. She was so warped by the images of her past haunting her, all of the blood and all of the gore, the knives, the tingling sensation, she was running to get away from it all. Chikami Sorai stopped Vera in her tracks, by leaping onto the rooftop and cutting ahead of Vera. The sixth seat fell on her ass. Come on, Vera-chan, there were tears her Zanpakuto's eyes, please take it back. You love me, right? Vera-chan is my best friend in the whole wide world, my partner. Vera scuttled back like a crab as Chikami Sorai kept sending the pinwheel portion of her weapon into the walls and calling it back as she honed in on her master. The whir of the blade continued to sound. Images of Vera's past played in her mind like a montage of horror film slides. Vera never felt so petrified in her life. Just say you love me, Vera-chan. Tell me you love me. Vera-chan is mine, right? Chikami Sorai asked with hopeful eyes. I don't wanna die. That was currently the only thought going through Vera's head. In truth, she had no idea her Zanpakuto was this mentally off balance. To her it seemed that when Muramasa said he would awaken the Zanpakuto's innermost desires, he really meant it. I don't want to hurt you, Vera-chan, but, Chikami Sorai said softly and then shouted, you're not giving me a choice. She sent the pinwheel speeding towards Vera. Vera dropped flat as the pinwheel went spiraling over her head and into the air. It did tear right through Vera's Kosud, Shitagi, and the front clasp of her bra though, and it nearly scratched her nose. For the second time in her life, Vera was too scared to pick up her sword. Chikami Sorai could see this, and when her pinwheel came back to her, walked over to her master and straddled her body. She inhaled strongly. You smell so sweetly covered in blood, Chikami Sorai said with her cheeks red as her hair and her tongue hanging out of her mouth. Chikami Sorai ran her hand up Vera's torso. I want to feel all of you, Vera-chan. Yamut, Vera protested. More visions started to come back into Vera's mind of similar situations, only it was a faceless man and not Chikami Sorai hovering over her. Chikami Sorai began to grope her master. Yamut. Chikami Sorai prepared to kiss Vera. The cold hard truth was that Vera didn't want to hurt Chikami Sorai either. While she didn't think of her in the way Chikami Sorai was currently showing she did to her, Vera still cared about her Zanpakuto and didn't want to do to her as she had done to so many other lovers and friends in the past before she became a Soul Reaper. By the time she finished contemplating, Chikami Sorai had just finished giving her master a spit trail kiss and was about to undress herself to unite the two of them. Vera couldn't take it anymore. She smiled sorrowfully at Chikami Sorai. Please forgive me, Chikami Sorai, Vera said, and with a quick, swift motion grabbed her blade firmly, sat up, and ran her Zanpakuto through the chest, impaling the redhead on her blade. Vera-chan. I don't hate you. Vera's good eye started to water, and it's killing me to do this to you, but Vera started to cry, I just want my friend back, that's all. I understand, Chikami Sorai said as her lungs filled with blood, I want to be with Vera-chan again. The spirit fell all the way through Vera's blade, completely impaling herself on it. As she began to fade, she put a hand on Vera's cheek. I'm coming back, so stop crying, okay? She then completely faded, but Vera did not heed her sword's request and sat with her legs crossed, holding her sword to her body, like it was a dead lover, and cried heartbrokenly. As if the battlefield wasn't enough of an emotional train wreck, Susanna was continuing to fight her friends as she maintained her sadistic and cruel facade. Kyokaka was ultimately down for the count and Momo was continuing to recover. Currently she was fighting Rainjiku and the vice captain currently had her Shikai released. Maybe you and I should switch captains. Rainjiku, Susanna taunted, a good subordinate is all about loyalty. She let loose a blast of lightning. Rainjiku blocked with her ash and used more of it to attack Susanna. Susanna blocked with an energy shield. You know, I remember when I was a little bit weaker than you. It was only months ago, but it seems like a whole different life. She sneered. Or are you simply holding back? Rainjiku wasn't holding back, she couldn't afford to. While Susanna and she had reached vice captaincy level, in terms of Ryutsu and in rank, at different times, on the same level, Susanna was the stronger of the two. Despite graduating in the same academic year, Susanna was in the advanced class, Rainjiku a beginner. Susanna was approximately 1.2 times stronger than Rainjiku, but the difference was small enough that, for Soul Reapers, this was considered an even fight. Still, like Kyokaku, Rainjiku thought taunting might work best. I was starting to think you were the one holding back, I'm getting bored over here. Susanna simply flashed a creepy smile. I am. Rainjiku's face was horror-stricken. She hadn't been serious. Susanna's entire body tensed with lightning energy. This is me giving a fuck. She shouted and thunderous boom sounded as she threw her arm out at her side. Her Ryutsu spiked to 1.5 times Rainjiku's level. Keshohari. A concentrated blast of lightning fired from Susanna's thrust forward arms and slammed into Rainjiku. Keshohari. Susanna let loose another one before Rainjiku could recover from the stun of the first attack. Koshi. Photon. Susanna spread out her palm and a small bolt fired from each of her fingers. She then tore through the air like lightning and reached Rainjiku just as her bolts reached the vice captain. She crouched on the ground, punched Rainjiku in the stomach, whirled around and whacked her with her long coat and then slapped the ground. Batondata. Volt Slam. A shockwave of energy erupted from the ground and launched Rainjiku into the air. Susanna jumped after her. Tenka. Spark. Susanna clenched her fist and lightning sparked from it and zapped Rainjiku. Tenka. She did it again. Denitsu Sensui. Volt Dive. Susanna folded her arms and channeled lightning into her feet and slammed them into Rainjiku, letting gravity and controlled descent angle do the rest of the work. She used Rainjiku as a springboard and pushed off the blonde, letting the energy transfer to Rainjiku, zapping her again, Denitsu Sensui. She did it again and this time zapped Rainjiku right into the pavement. She brought herself to the ground and continued her assault without letting up. Fumi Denitsu. Volt Stomp. She brought her leg up and stomped the ground and the electrice waves along her leg sparked as she brought it down, continuing to zap Rainjiku. Batondata. She launched Rainjiku into the air once again. Tenka. Tenka. Denitsu Sensui. Denitsu Sensui. She followed with the 4-hit attack and left Rainjiku pretty thoroughly injured on the ground, but Susanna wasn't done. Before she reached the ground she continued her assault. Keshohari. She zapped Rainjiku again. The woman began to start screaming out in pain from all of the electricity in her body. Susanna charged her fingertips with energy and held her wrist. Koshi Haretsu. She unleashed blast after blast of giant bolts of energy into Rainjiku's position on the ground. Rainjiku had been used as a human lightning rod so much that when Susanna hovered over her she was barely conscious, her breathing was heavy and her eyes were shut. Susanna picked Rainjiku up by the lapels of her corset and tossed her behind her and then slapped her hands together as she slapped the dirt off them. Susanna. The shout was loud and it came from behind. Susanna glanced casually behind her. Momo was awake and on her feet and she was really pissed. She was holding Tobium in its sealed state and red spirit energy coursed around her like wildfire. I cannot and will not allow you to hurt our friends any longer. I don't know what you and Lamperouge-sensei are up to, but until I know your reasons. It does not justify the use of excessive violence against friends. Momo let out a berserk, high-pitched scream. Susanna actually brought up her arms to cover her face from the energy going everywhere. Such power, where's it all coming from? That's it Momo, let go of the bonds of friendship, do the right thing, let anger and fury push you towards levels you would not reach otherwise, Tobium instructed. Yes, Momo swallowed and tears trailed down her cheeks, I understand. Momo's hands shook with rage and Tobium flashed and, without calling it out, it transformed into its Shikai state. That's impossible, Susanna stared with shock, unless... Momo shouted at the top of her lungs. Baaon, she took a breath, Kaai. Her spiritual power flooded everywhere. Yuna felt it from her location. Who's that coming from? She didn't recognize Momo's Ryotsu, having not been around the girl long enough, but she could tell it was Captain Class. Eyes on me or you'll lose them, she heard her Zanpakuto's voice. Yuna turned her attention back to Yogo Kaikai and blocked her Zanpakuto's Bankai as best she could, and received another chip in her sword. Yuna could hardly keep her Zanpakuto from crushing her, much less push Yogo Kaikai off her. That's not good, Yuna, you'll never defeat me with that kind of resolve. What happened from a few moments ago? You seemed all ready to go, but once I went Bankai I've been dominating you the whole match. Our difference in power may be vast, but I shouldn't be able to damage your sword this easily. Yogo Kaikai told her. She pushed Yuna's blade to the side and then punched the captain in the face, knocking Yuna to the ground. Teiga Sei Hoki. Yogo Kaikai put the tip of her blade towards the ground and then swung up fast. The energy beam ripped towards Yuna. She put one knee on the ground and bent the other one, not having time to dodge, and held her Zanpakuto like a hockey goalie if they needed to put both hands on their stick and braced for impact. The attack pushed her back along the ground, but Yuna received no bodily injuries. However, as she stood up, her Zanpakuto became cracked all over and then shattered, leaving her with only the guard, handle and hilt. Yuna looked down in fright at the loss of her sword. She saw Yogo Kaikai approaching her steadily until they stood a decent distance apart from one another. Still, Yuna looked fiercely at her Zanpakuto and held her weapon as if she still had one to use. That's cute, Yuna, do you really think you can beat me with only the hilt? Yogo Kaikai asked. It's not like I have much of a choice now, is it? Yuna asked. Yogo Kaikai smirked, almost as if she was proud of Yuna's determination. No, I suppose not. Before we clash again though, I have something to ask you. Yuna asked. What's that? Yogo Kaikai wanted to know. Have you forgotten all the reasons I asked to hold on to your true power, the power that you now use against me? Yogo Kaikai didn't answer. If you have, then let me remind you. Yuna's grip tightened on the handle of her blade. It was so I could not only get vengeance for Mari-sama, but also to protect Lelouch and everyone else I care about. I told you that I would make Lelouch answer for what he's done. My honor and mercy is not so deeply seated that I will allow his betrayal to go unchallenged. I questioned to myself, what if Mari-sama had betrayed me? Would I be this adamant as well? And I would. I can walk on my own and I will not allow myself to be betrayed by the ones I hold dear. So you would kill Lelouch if he has truly turned? Yogo Kaikai asked. My Bankai is my own proof that I have the power to walk on my own 2 feet, Yuna said and shouted in declaration as her bright green Ryotsu circulated around her, let's end this. Yogo Kaikai gripped her katana with both her hands. I wouldn't have it any other way. She and Yuna ran towards each other. Yuna began muttering to herself as she ran. Thoroughbred of deceit, Yahoo's blade shines with cold steel, angel of darkness, demon of light, mongrel of war. Enhance your claws, be mindful of the sea. Alter the path of God, sear the wicked. Unable to hear Yuna through the wind blowing past her ears and the adrenaline rushing through her body, Yogo Kaikai continued her charge unimpeded. I don't know what your plan is, Yuna, but if you don't move this will sting. She brought her blade down into Yuna's shoulder, spraying the captain's blood. Yuna swung her bladeless weapon so that the mouth of the guard faced into Yogo Kaikai's stomach. She didn't even try to dodge me. She glanced at the position of Yuna's arm, and why is she holding her blade as if she intentionally swung it despite the fact that there is no blade? Hado 77, 10th Subasa, Yuna spoke passively and a bright blue energy blade shot forth from the empty guard into Yogo Kaikai's stomach and through her armor and out the other end. Blood poured from the blonde spirit's mouth as she became impaled on Yuna's attack, which continued off behind her for another 2 feet of energy blade. You wanted to see the size of my resolve? Yuna asked her Zanpakuto. This little scratch, she referred to the deep gash in her shoulder, is nothing compared to what I'm about to do to you. Don't. The word was stuck in Yogo Kaikai's throat. With a fierce battle cry, Yuna gripped the energy blade fiercely and hacked upwards, splitting Yogo Kaikai in half all the way up from the entry wound. Blood spattered like a fountain from the forceful tearing as the Kido dissipated as Yuna held the length energy blade above her head, returning it to just a hilt. With her form unable to maintain any life force, considering the lethality of the damage Yuna had inflicted, Yogo Kaikai returned to her master's sword, repairing it as it returned to its sealed state. Yuna grabbed left-right pant leg, cut it off from the knee down with her blade and then split it so that it could be folded into a square, but rather than doing that used it to dress her wound, a survival tactic she had been taught during her time chasing Hashimatreva. She then put away her sword. She sensed that the battles with Fumetsu Seishin no Senso and Minagiki were growing continually fierce. She figured then that it would be best to collect the wounded and bring them to Isane, assuming that Anohana would choose to engage her own Zanpakuto in battle. The fight with Minagiki had barely begun to get interesting, and the green-hooded spirit was playing a case of dodge sword with its opponents while Kenpei's battle with his Zanpakuto was nearing its conclusion. After all, Fumetsu Seishin no Senso was growing close to reaching his final level. Kenpei was fighting with both hands on his blade and had managed a few more injuries on his Zanpakuto, careful now to only make strikes when he was certain that he could inflict damage. Despite his obvious advantage, Kenpei was frowning. Having to fight while using my head really is a nuisance, but I have to make sure that this guy isn't in top form when he reaches level 5. I can't afford to lose. Not again. An image of Hikira with her back to Kenpei glancing at him as her body faced the sunset entered his mind. Not ever. Fumetsu Seishin no Senso took a fierce swing at Kenpei, but was blocked. Let's see here for a proper parry. Kenpei recalled the technique. Oh yeah. He remembered. He curled his arms, get underneath for proper leverage, push. He pushed Fumetsu Seishin no Senso's blade up and away. And cut. He brought both hands down and attempted to split his former partner in half. He missed, but barely. Fumetsu Seishin no Senso came at him from the right side and attacked. Kenpei blocked, but the bearded spirit did not let up. Is he getting impatient, or is he being like me? Realization hit. Like me? Kenpei smiled. And why are you smiling all of a sudden? Fumetsu Seishin no Senso asked. I was just thinking that you really are like me a little if you're constantly hacking and slashing like this with no real care at all. This time I'm the one thinking and you're not, Kenpei chuckled. Don't be absurd, for every time you block me, I block you, or we inflict damage on one another, my meter goes up. Nothing happens if we miss each other, Fumetsu Seishin no Senso replied. That's so. Kenpei chuckled and took a half-assed swing to put himself in a stance where his unequipped arm was out in front of him, palm open, legs were spread apart in an L pattern and his sword itself was faced out behind him, his body slopped with the sword end tilted up. With a fierce cry, Kenpei spun like a top. Ryotsu kicked up everywhere and the sheer centripetal force generated outward was like that of a mobile passenger airplane at cruising altitude. Kenpei spun multiple times as he pivoted himself constantly to draw near his opponent. Fumetsu couldn't get close from the force being generated, much less make a decision on how to counterattack. He simply kept his guard up. Clang. Kenpei smashed his sword against his Zanpakutos. Pashing. The blade of his opponent was severed at its midpoint. FSSH. A third strike and a fierce laceration went right through Fumetsu Seishin no Senso's ironclad muscles. Kenpei continued to spin. He had forgotten the joy he received from using this attack, but his opponents always wound up dying or suffocating after the first swing, but he could tell his Zanpakuto was still standing. He was laughing as he continued to spin. He stopped only when he noticed that he was starting to lose grip on his sword and he didn't need it flying off in a random direction. He wasn't the least bit disoriented from all the spinning and looked at his bearded partner. Oh yeah, that's what I call fun. You won't be having fun for much longer, Fumetsu Seishin no Senso stated. The portion of the blade he was holding was already covered in red flames and the blade that had fallen off was continuing to climb. Kenpei put two and two together. Well, it's about time, he chuckled. You won't have that haughty attitude for much longer, Fumetsu Seishin no Senso stated and then felt it when the blade was fully charged. Maximum. Ryotsu shook all of the tiny pebbles on the ground, turning them to dust. The ground caved in under Fumetsu Seishin no Senso and there was an explosion of spiritual power and once again he was back in the same black, barefoot uniform as before. Bring it, Kenpei taunted. In a flash of speed Fumetsu Seishin no Senso disappeared and before Kenpei could blink grabbed his blade and snapped it with his bare hands by squeezing the metal rather than chopping or breaking it over his knee, because that's what real men do. He didn't even cut his hand. He then, with a single fist repeatedly punched Kenpei in the face and chest, continually inflicting cheekbone and ribcage damage until Kenpei sucker punched him with a blind, fierce left hook. Fumetsu Seishin no Senso ducked under the swing and prepared to trip Kenpei. Kenpei responded in kind by tossing his broken blade into his Zanpakuto's chest. It caught him right in the ribs, but it didn't sink through very deep. As Kenpei retreated back a few steps Fumetsu Seishin no Senso ripped the blade out and tossed it aside only to see Kenpei stretch out his legs and stomp them onto the ground and take a right lead stance. Fumetsu Seishin no Senso was surprised by this development. I'm gonna do what you do, since you broke yourself, I'll use my hands and feet too, Kenpei grinned. By breaking himself he was referring to Fumetsu Seishin no Senso breaking his sword form that Kenpei had been using. You don't have the means, Fumetsu Seishin no Senso taunted. Says you, Kenpei said and charged. He and his Zanpakuto cross-countered over and under each other's fists respectively and punched each other in the face. Both then turned and roundhouse kicked into each other, but from the impact Kenpei felt his leg nearly shatter, but Fumetsu Seishin no Senso felt no such immense impact. With a frustrated sneer Kenpei palmed his Zanpakuto in the face, gripped and then chucked him, hoping the force would snap his enemy's neck. It didn't. In fact the only thing that moved was Kenpei's hand off his opponent's face. Kenpei's face suddenly had "oh crap" written all over it. Fumetsu Seishin no Senso punted Kenpei in the ABS and kicked him into the air. He jumped into the air and brought his heel into Kenpei's spine and sent him slamming back into the ground. Then, like a human rocket, Fumetsu Seishin no Senso tore towards the ground and smashed his fist into Kenpei's back. Thankfully he didn't hit the same spot he had just brought his heel down on or he might have broken Kenpei's spine. Kenpei vomited blood just the same though. Dead or alive there's a limit to what the humanoid spirit can do. You have reached that limit Kenpei, while I'm only beginning to tap into mine. Face it, I'm better than you, Fumetsu Seishin no Senso told his partner. He about face and began to walk away, but Kenpei grabbed his leg. Get your ass over here, Kenpei snarled, we're not done. We most certainly are done, Fumetsu Seishin no Senso said, the results are clear to me now. Continuing to fight you would be like picking on a defenseless puppy. I'd much rather fight a baby kitten, at least they fight back. Kenpei's grip tightened on the bearded spirit's leg. I said, we're not done. Kenpei declared and Ryotsu exploded. Fumetsu Seishin no Senso removed his grip from Kenpei immediately. His ankle was bleeding a little simply from Kenpei's grip. Kenpei then got back on his feet and stood steadily. Impossible, he should be battered and bruised to the point where he can barely move. Even if he's standing he shouldn't be able to exude such Ryotsu. What the hell is going on? You're not dealing with the average Kenpei, Kenpei spoke to his sword. Oh no, 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 Fumetsu Seishin no Senso folded his arms and shook his head, I know how this goes. You're going to say that you're some kind of legend, a sort of super Kenpei or something. You and I both know that that's a load of shit. Yeah, probably, sounds cool though, Kenpei laughed, nevertheless, think about it Senso, Kenpei said calling his Zanpakuto by an appropriate nickname, I didn't have a true name until I became Zaraki no Kenpei. I am, when it boils down to it, a true Kenpei. Kenpei's spirit energy began leaking from his body. His eyes glowed yellow and he flashed his blood-encrusted pearly whites, grinning as if he were the king of demons. I don't quit, I don't die. I am an elite warrior. You can beat me down time and again and I will always get back up. I trained long and hard for this. I've been training so that if I pulled out all the stops, used every amount of my spirit energy that I'd be unbeatable. I didn't have a chance against Ichigo and with you, you beat me already so that's why no matter how often you send me to the ground I will not quit. I am unstoppable. Fumetsu Seishin no Senso shook his head side to side, There is no greater force than me, partner, the bearded spirit said and scowled, taking a right lead stance. Kenpei chuckled, so it looks like what we have here is a case of unstoppable force against a movable object, eh? You're not unstoppable, Fumetsu Seishin no Senso stated. Kenpei chuckled, I beg to differ. I am indestructible with determination incorruptible, from the other side a terror to behold, annihilation unavoidable. All my broken enemies know that I am undefeatable. Just like you, I am also an indestructible spirit of war. Kenpei charged at top speed towards his Zanpakuto, fist prepared to deliver a cold hard punch. Fumetsu Seishin no Senso simply shook his head sadly and roundhouse kicked Kenpei in the face as he approached. Nevertheless, Kenpei got up and the energy ebbing from him continued to do so. I will never give up. Kenpei kept fighting, hoping that his never-ending spirit, that Fumetsu Seishin no Senso would concede to his unwavering resolve, but not matter how many times he got up, he was put down more fiercely than the last time. You're using your life force to keep going, that's how you even manage to put up a fight right now? Is winning really so important to you? Fumetsu Seishin no Senso asked. Of course. Kenpei shouted. I need to keep getting stronger. You were showing me that path, I must get stronger. Kenpei squeezed out every bit of Ryutsu he could to keep his body going. Then show me how strong you can be, Fumetsu Seishin no Senso let his own energy flow out to Kenpei. I will let you borrow my power for one attack. You've been fighting for a while, so you should be capable of reaching this level. Kenpei grinned with glee. All right then, maximum. Kenpei's spiritual power charged up nice and thick and then exploded fiercely. Pebbles and the like blew apart and the ground caved in beneath Kenpei's feet. His muscles tore through his Haori and his Kosid, and Kenpei grew to being 8 feet tall. A graphite-colored, metallic super skin formed itself over his body as if Kenpei had just been shoved inside a hot oven and awesomeness had been welded onto him. Kenpei's eyes were filled with spiritual power. The power crackled in his peepers like blood-red flames. In this form, Kenpei really lived up to his name. He grinned, no matter how many hits I take, I never go down. He flexed his arm, as long as I fight I win. He charged forward with his fist primed for action. I am a Kenpei. I am indestructible. Kenpei cracked Fumetsu Seishin no Senso right in the chest and the Zanpakuto disintegrated on impact. His final thoughts as he faded were, "Stood, we really are stronger together, aren't we, partner?" The moment passed and Kenpei still had his arm outstretched. He stopped and looked at his pseudo-metallic body and grinned before looking at the sky and laughing in elation. He was so happy. He had so much power, but, as Fumetsu Seishin no Senso promised, it was only for that attack. After a few seconds of laughing, the Ryutsu faded, his skin went back to normal and Kenpei's knees buckled under his own injuries and he fell forward and hit the ground, unconscious. Meanwhile, Tensou Zanjutsu and Ichigo had just finished combining and Ichigo was feeling primed for action. He still couldn't use Bankai, he needed Old Man Zanjutsu to pull that off, but he still had his mask and his Shikai's full power. Are you ready, Ichigo? Zanjutsu asked and whipped out Bankai to prepare to fight his master. Tell me one thing, old man, why didn't you stay? Ichigo asked as he put his hand over his face, ready to pull out his mask at a moment's notice. What is your desire? Simple, to challenge you. Zanjutsu pointed his katana at his master, to see if you can completely erase my doubts that you are indeed worthy of my power. I see, Ichigo replied, is that right? And if I am stronger, you will return. When both of my halves left you, you lost the ability to use both Shikai and Bankai. You awakened Shikai on your own, proof that you can stand on your own 2 legs, then you asked my other half to return to you, proof that you have cast aside needless fear. Now, the ultimate test, black energy radiated underneath Zanjutsu, use the full power of the power you fear and see if you can defeat the power you use to protect. So that's how it is, huh? Another life lesson? Got it, Ichigo said and hollow-eyed. With Tensou Zanjutsu in his body he could match Zanjutsu's speed. Even with Bankai, Zanjutsu did not have Tensou Zanjutsu in him, so he could not move at amazing speeds. It would suffice though. Getsuga Tensho, Zanjutsu fired forward the black energy beam at Ichigo. It was 70% the blast's maximum power. Ichigo did his best to dodge. He felt the black energy licking at his heels. I won't make it, he gasped only to feel a supernatural push, like a gust of wind blow his body and push him out of harm's way. Don't worry, Ichigo. Inside Ichigo's inner world, standing atop his katana stood Tensou Zanjitsu, projecting his thoughts to his master. I will keep you out of harm's way. Focus on the fight and I will protect you from danger. Not a problem. Ichigo used the nearby column for leverage and pushed off it to fly towards Zanjitsu at accelerated speeds. He drew back his sword. Getsuga Tensho. A full-powered Shikai Getsuga Tensho went barreling towards Zanjitsu, but, much to Ichigo's amazement, with a single wave of his blade he sliced it away. What? That, Zanjitsu glared disappointingly, is not the pinnacle of your power. It's okay Ichigo, you can use it. I am focusing all of my power to suppress your hollow. He will not get out a second time. Trust me, just as I trust you. Tensou Zanjitsu spoke, eyes closed, deep in meditation. Okay. Zanjitsu waited for Ichigo to make his move. I'm a little worried, I've never used this without Bankai, can you really hold me together? Ichigo asked. It will tire me out, but if you manage to reclaim my other half you will not lose control of yourself. I promise. All right then. Ichigo said and put his sword away. The blade on Zanjitsu wasn't edged properly for him to fire the attack off of his sword. He probably couldn't even chance using the attack's specialty variant without Bankai either. The normal version would have to suffice. Just concentrate, Ichigo thought to himself, don't even worry about losing control. He held out his palm towards Zanjitsu and curled his fingers, turn back and you will age, a whitish-blue ball of energy, with sparks poking around it formed in his palm, hesitate and you will die. The orb condensed and began to expand and contract rapidly as more energy drew into it. 0. The flash tore towards Zanjitsu. The attack, several times mightier than the Getsuga Tensho, blasted towards the sunglasses-wearing spirit. Zanjitsu smiled, yes, that's the power I was referring to, but, is it enough? He held up his blade. Let us see, Getsuga Tensho. Zanjitsu fired forward the Black Moon Fang, and it caught onto Ichigo's Zero, but was ultimately consumed by the attack. Rather than gasping or being shocked, Zanjitsu's smirk turned into a broad smile. As I expected, very good Ichigo, I have nothing left to teach you. His thoughts transferred to his other half. His training rests in your hands now. I am aware of that, Tensou Zanjitsu replied. The Zero consumed Zanjitsu and there was silence. Ichigo's mask shattered and he felt powerful. When he put his hand to the non-standard handle of his blade he could feel Zanjitsu's energy back in it. It's good to have you back old man. Ichigo said and lowered himself to the ground. Now, Ichigo said, looking around as he thought aloud, I should probably get one of the guys in 4th Division to heal me or find Tatsuki, then I should. An explosion of spiritual energy over by the 4th Division broke him from his train of thought. It was way too close to the actual barracks for comfort, thankfully it was away from the sick bay. What was that? Ichigo wondered. His question was answered when he could see, from the distance, a 5-headed creature emerge from far away. What is that thing? On sight, the Soul Reapers facing that thing knew exactly what it was, Minazuki's Bankai form. Its 5 heads were all aligned like the heads of a hydra. From left to right the heads arranged themselves in the following order: red, green, blue, white, black. The creature's body was much like the Shikai body of Minazuki, green and slimy with manta ray-like fins for wings. Its tail sagged on the ground. The tail alone weighed 90 pounds. The feet were the chicken-like talons that also were a part of Minazuki's Shikai. Do let its size intimidate you, Hisuna spoke firmly, we can take it if we work together. Hisuna, did you pop a bunch of stupid pills and hit your head this morning? Kaien asked, freaked out, that's Ano Hinateiko's Bankai. You are insane, if you think I'm even going to try fighting that. Don't you remember the war reports? Ano Hinateiko easily dispatched one of the Espada that annihilated 2 Vizards and Komamura Teiko. I don't care how weak Zanpakuto become when they are separated from their masters. Kaien crossed his arms over his body, I am not fighting that thing. Oh, don't be such a baby, Hisuna told him. Oh, of course, easy for you to say, you've got more power than some of the more experienced captains with that powered-up form you're in. You don't need to worry about Jack. Meaningless fear only begets failure. Hisuna shouted, besides it's Anohana Teiko herself that's the nightmare, not Minajiki. I have confidence in my skills. Hisuna held both her hands on her long Masamune. As if to prove a point, Minajiki breathed fire from its red head and scorched Hisuna's body fiercely. Her blade and wing disintegrated on contact. Okay, plan B, Hisuna said holding her palms fully extended and blinking rapidly. And plan B would be? Kyan inquired. Ryuun. Hisuna shouted at the top of her lungs. She and Kyan began making a run for it. Rukia was already down for the count, having fallen to Minajiki in its Shikai mode. The creature did little more than ram into her and Rukia was on the ground. Hisuna scooped up her sister as she ran by her while Minajiki followed in rampage. Nice going, Hisuna, Kyan yelled at her as the pair ran and jumped over a low-rising rooftop. You pissed it off. Hey, I was only trying to play psychological warfare. If we didn't let it think it was terrifying us, we might have stood a better chance, Hisuna shot back. Aha. Kyan pointed at her, you're just as spooked as I am. Well duh. Hisuna barked back, you think I want to fight Anohana Teiko's Bankai? I'll pass, but we don't have a choice right now, do we? So then why are we running? Kyan asked. A shadow flew over their heads and Hisuna saw the Haori and the puce inside collar of the coat. Hisuna skidded to a halt. That's why. Kyan stopped and looked to see the Soul Reaper that had just gone flying over his and Hisuna's heads. He saw the long black hair and as the wind brushed it to the side the kanji of the number 4 on the back of the Haori. Is she? Yes, she's undone her braid. We should probably find a safe place to hide. This is not going to end cleanly, Hisuna finished Kyan's query. She never saw a man break off into Shunpo so quickly. As Anohana approached her Zanpakuto, her sword already unsheathed, holding it in her right hand, she saw the white head of her Bankai dart forward and try to eat a division member. Heido 88, Hiri Yujikazoku Shintenreiho. With her offhand, Anohana blasted the creature in the face and stood in front of it on a low-rising rooftop. Out for a walk? Anohana asked. The multi-headed creature growled at its master. I see, that's not what I wanted to hear, Anohana said as if understanding what Minajiki was saying. The Zanpakuto hissed. Don't take that tone with me, Anohana chided, you know better. The creature snarled. Anohana simply sighed, Bakudo 63, Seija Sabaku. She tied the binding stripes around the central head and pulled on the portion in her hand as if it were a leash. You've been a very bad girl, Minajiki. Your misbehavior shall be met with punishment. The black head chomped on the leash and tore it up and then roared at Anohana. Very well, I did not think it would be that easy, Anohana said calmly and then swung her blade into position with both of her hands. She gave Minajiki a soft smile, I came prepared to fight you. It's been a long time since I've been allowed to revisit how I used to be. That is what you want me to do, yes? That is why you left, isn't it? A low, muttering growl could be heard in the multi-headed beast's throat. Then I shall enjoy this as I used to, for you, my friend. Anohana's smile grew wide like the not-so-innocent child that used to enjoy cutting people up and ritually arranging their organs in specific places. Here I come. To be continued. Chapter 102, Anohana Retsu, the only thing she fears. Third-person POV. Anohana stood staring down her five-headed Bankai. In the next instant the red head breathed a torrent of fire at its master, but Anohana disappeared and reappeared directly behind Minajiki, coming down at a 90-degree angle with both hands on the handle of the blade, tip tearing into Minajiki's spine. However, before Anohana could cut down more than a few feet, Minajiki's tail lashed out to attack her. Anohana cancelled out of her strike with a backflip and with an aerial spin cut the tip of the tail before using Shunpo as the green head circle behind the body and tried to bite her. Anohana landed on a rooftop off to the hideous monster's left. Heido 31, Shakkeiho. Anohana ran clockwise around Minajiki back towards the front of its body. The energy blasts gave Anohana a smoke screen cover as well as blasting the hell out of the white head. Anohana saw the blue head rear up and launch a missile of acid at her. Anohana took the air, leaping over the liquid projectile, front flipped as she passed over it and then angled herself down towards the monster and used Shunpo to push herself down towards the ground like a bolt of lightning and penetrated Minajiki in its soft underbelly. The green and black heads angrily began snapping at Anohana and she was forced to abandon her sword inside the monster's abdomen. The weapon was eventually dissolved by the caustic blood inside Minajiki's body and the now broken, corroded blade dropped to the ground. Still, Anohana was not defeated just because she was unarmed. The green head opened its mouth and fired a gigantic green blast of energy at her. Hado 88, Hiri Yujikazoku Shintenreiho. Anohana countered. To counter, Minajiki's black head swallowed the Kido and it was relaunched out of the red head complete with its destructive fire on top of it. Anohana dodged out of the way by means of Shunpo only for the white head to snake around and try to eat her. Hado 77, 10th Tsubasa. Holding her hand like a sword, the Kido extended off of the healing squad captain's arm and she sliced the white head in half. The head disintegrated and started to regrow back at the base of the beast's neck. Anohana looked at her Zanpakuto with a serious look. What will it take to make you return to me? This obscene violence is pointless. The green head hissed at her fiercely. You cannot know what you ask, Anohana told Minajiki with a shake of her head. If I do as you say, I could lose myself in the frenzy. There are people too close to me that I could hurt. A low growl emitted from the five-headed beast. Anohana seemed solemn. Please do not force my hand, Minajiki, it will only end in your destruction. I do not need to go wild to defeat you. Rito will be very disappointed in me if I do as you ask. Those days are over, Minajiki. I'm a healer, not a killer. A fierce growl was let loose by the black head. You want the apex of my ability? Fine. Anohana flung off her Haori and removed her scabbard from her back, letting it clatter along the ground as well. I will remove the seal upon myself, the seal I keep locked away inside myself. Anohana was referring to the fact that, even in Soul Society, to avoid harming her allies as she walked by them. By removing this limiter on her, she would have no control on the riot, so she leaked and she would be very similar to Zaraki in terms of looking forward to battle. But first, other things were in order. Bakudo 93, Byotayankan. Arena Seal. Anohana flung out her arms and stereotypical charm seals went flying through the air and surrounded her and Minajiki in a box-like arena for everything within a 5 square kilometer radius. The box was then shrunk until the only living bodies inside it were Anohana and Minajiki. It was a special Kido designed to keep an opponent from escaping a certain boundary. Only Soul Reapers with high magnitude of power could sustain it while fighting. Inside the barrier, Senkaimons and Garganta were unusable as the Kido became a sort of isolated space from the rest of the area. It was similar to when the Central 46 would place holds on a specific sector in the world of the living whenever a hollow attacked to prevent civilian casualty, but this Kido was exuded by a single Soul Reaper in a much more condensed space maintained by their Ryotsu. With Shunpo, Anohana darted in and grabbed her broken blade. She still had half of a sword left, but with what she planned to do with it, it would suffice. Unlike Kenpei and even Stefan, the strength of Anohana's blade work was not limited simply by the steel extending from her reach. There was much more she could do. With the broken blade in hand, Anohana chanted to herself. The syllables she spoke seemed to be disjointed, not forming proper words. When she finished, a mixture of colored Ryuryoku formed around Anohana, yellow, red, and green, all deep shades and very flush, not pasty or pale. The colors were like fresh paint. As a result of releasing her power, her soft blue eyes glowed red, pulsing with excess uncontrolled Ryotsu. I hope you appreciate this, Anohana told Minajiki, because it will be very straining on my body to maintain this release and the Kido. Minajiki simply growled in delight, as if welcoming Anohana's current state. Very well. In the next instant, Anohana ripped her broken blade up in a diagonal direction towards the sky, and although she was several meters from Minajiki, she managed to sever its left wing entirely from its body, surprising Minajiki. This is what you asked for, Anohana told her Zanpakuto, you should have no regrets. While things grew darker for Minajiki, they grew lighter for Momo. Her Bankai had manifested and it looked rather peculiar. Momo's Shiakusho had shrunken on her body to show off her midriff and her legs, toned from her decades of battle. However, the view legs were obscured by tight-fitting black high-heeled shoes that went up towards Momo's knees. Rings of fire wrapped around the ankles. pink, lace ribbons coated Momo's arms and tied themselves down like wrapped bandages on arms. The remainder of the ribbon flew out behind Momo's shoulders. Momo's blade had also changed. For one thing, it was glowing. Secondly, it was now 50% larger, and rather than having 3 prongs it had 7, looking more like a proper Shishisaito rather than a long sword with prongs. Also, the guard rounded down over Momo's clenched fist like an upside-down bowl. Yudanita Byam Koken. Majestic flying plum tree guardian. Susanna lay on her side in midair and looked at her hands, appearing to be bored. So that's it, just a wardrobe change in a bigger sword. Newsflash, Momo, Susanna said, levitating in midair in front of the vice captain, but unless you've got some sort of ultra-powerful signature move with that package, you're not going to beat me. Susanna extended her arm out to Momo and lightning sparked in her head. I have more than twice your years of experience. Just because you have Bankai does not mean you have what it takes to defeat me. Your taunts will not work on me. I know you fear my power. Acting calm won't save you from my wrath, Momo told Susanna. Then attack me, Susanna taunted. Momo leapt at Susanna with battle-mad fury. She struck Susanna with her massive blade, but missed, and Susanna fired a blast of lightning into her arm and sent her into the ground. Susanna began spamming energy balls at Momo, but Momo was suddenly behind her and attacked with a white fireball that went launching off of her sword. Susanna didn't have time to dodge it and took a direct hit. She gained aerial and saw Momo coming in with both hands on her blade. Hato 58, Tenran. The fierce gale impeded Momo's advance and Susanna appeared behind her. Denitsu Sensui. With a high-powered gravity-enhanced dive, Susanna slammed her feet into Momo's back, coming in direct contact with Momo's skin, causing her to cry out in pain before the poor girl was sent slamming into the ground. Susanna landed harshly on the ground as Momo quickly rose to her feet to face off against her once more. So you've got faster fireballs and enhanced durability, big deal. I command the most powerful element in nature, Susanna said, sparking her hands with lightning and giving a devilish smile to Momo. Not to mention this is your first time using your Bankai, so it's wholly incomplete and not battle-ready. You may have gotten stronger, but without any understanding of how to use that strength it's of little effect to someone that knows how to fight. A white flame circulated around Momo's sword and with a fierce swing sent out an arc of white flame towards Susanna, far too wide for her to dodge. However, Susanna advanced on Momo by leaping over her attack and punching her right in the diaphragm. Tenka. The shock to Momo's system elicited another pained cry and sent her flying back. Flipping backwards though, Momo stuck her sword into the ground and used it as a fulcrum to stop herself and land safely. Susanna used Shunpo to catch up with the girl and stand a safe distance from her. Tell me, Momo, must we fight? Susanna asked with a smirk. You adore Lelouch Dano, he's your precious sensei. Why will you not fight at our side? I'm not like you, Susanna. My loyalty is not undying towards Lamperouge sensei. When we were in the Phantoms I did not fight purely out of loyalty. I also saw that I had lived so naively in life. I didn't see the corruption or the chaos that I lived in, and it had always been right under my nose. Lamperouge sensei opened my eyes and I am thankful for that, but, Momo held her sword out in front of her and stared Susanna down. He also taught me that corruption must be met with the fires of redemption and divinity. And so, if sensei has turned, I will fight him, just as I will fight anyone else who turns out to be corrupted or against the Soul Society. That includes you, Shaipani-senpai. Phew, Susanna chuckled, putting her hand underneath her chin. So that's your reasoning, is it? That's all you've taken in these last 35 years? I'm disappointed, Momo. Lelouch Dano is justice. Susanna spread out her arms. Not from where I'm standing. If you two and Kukaki Teiko won't give your reasons, then it is the Soul Society is justice, but, I'm not fighting you right now because of any of that. I'm fighting you because you relentlessly beat down Rangiku-san and Kyokaku-sama, and this is my power, the power to protect, Momo glared. So be it, Susanna said, drawing in power. I still maintain that your Bankai is not ready to see combat, and that will make all the difference in this battle. We shall see, Momo stated. Make your move, Susanna taunted. Momo let out several arcs of flame. This time she combined one vertical flame and one horizontal flame, but Susanna went in between the top right segment of the white flames and somersaulted through the air. Kaminari Raisin. Twisting like a rotating mermaid through the water, Susanna tore towards Momo, and as she neared her switched techniques. Denitsu Sensui. Susanna slammed towards Momo with her heels, but missed as Momo retreated back. Kes Hohari. Momo swung vertically to create an arc of flame. The two attacks cancelled each other out, but Susanna, having anticipated Momo's counter, reappeared behind her with a sly, confident smirk on her face. Momo turned her head and gasped just as Susanna punched her in the stomach. Tenka, Susanna used Shunpo to blow past Momo and gathered energy in her hands. Kaminari Ken. She launched the electrical plasma ball, and Momo, into the air. Momo gained aerial control, circled through the air and dove towards Susanna. As suspected, Susanna chuckled to herself. Koshi Haretsu. Susanna fired blast after blast of bolts of energy at Momo. Momo had to brace for impact and Susanna took to the sky. Tenka. Tenka. Denitsu Sensui. Denitsu Sensui. Momo was sent spiraling into the ground. Kes Hohari. Susanna blasted Momo with the lightning blast and finally let herself descend all the way to the ground. This battle is over, she declared casually and hovered her left hand over the ground where Momo lay, creating a cylindrical tube of solid lightning, effectively trapping Momo inside. Momo opened her eyes and tried to bash and cut her way open, but it was fruitless. The inside of the tube was made of seki. Susanna drew her arm under breasts. Momo began banging on the container. There was no air inside the tube other than what had been in it prior to its activation. It was a pretty effective semi-vacuum. "Oh, what's that, Momo?" Susanna asked as Momo banged again and again on the wall, with Susanna unable to hear her. "You want out?" She grinned like an arsonist about to watch a building go up in flames and held up her right hand. "Sorry, too bad." She snapped her fingers and at the same time called the activation of her attack, Higo Yoki. Aegis container. Instantly, from all sides the inner layer of the tube began shocking Momo over and over again, using her like a human lightning rod, making the whole container something like that of a human-sized blender. Susanna watched Momo struggle for a bit until she was certain the girl had taken enough. "Let's close the lid on this, shall we?" Susanna then smacked her right arm over her left, making it so that her arms were folded underneath her bosom, and instantly the entire tube exploded in a condensed blast of nearly 20 billion volts. Momo dropped to the ground, Bankai disengaged, having lost consciousness midway through the electric torture, and lay on the ground with Tobium's handle underneath her right hand. Electricity still coursed through Momo's body, sparking every few seconds, causing her body to involuntarily spasm. Susanna looked around and attempted to sense more Ryotsus, but found none. "Guess that's it then," she said, and sealed and sheathed a Zanpakuto before she touched a small radio device she had tucked behind her ear. "The only one currently fighting is Minajiki. Shall I converge on your position?" "Yes, do that," Lelich said. "Make no haste though, in case there are unexpected developments, and to make sure you are not seen or detected. Kendra's still strong, and so is Yolanda. With the amount of Ryotsu you expelled, especially after taking on a stage 1 Bankai, you'll be hard-pressed for more." "How did you?" Susanna didn't know how Lelich had known exactly what she'd gone through. "Same as always, Kakushitsujaku," Lelich responded. "Right then, I'm heading for the rendezvous point, Lelich Dano," Susanna said and took off. As Susanna mentioned, Anohana was currently the only fighter left on the field, and she and Minajiki had been locked in intense combat during Momo's little Bankai escapade. Anohana had taken some injury caused by the snapping jaws of Minajiki's white head. A small section of the right side of her abdomen was missing, and she had also been swatted by Minajiki's tail and hit her head, so she was bleeding from that injury as well. Still, she fought with a stoic expression on her face. Minajiki beat its good wing and created a torrent of wind and breathed fire into the gale to surround her master with a wall of flames, but Anohana was not so easily disoriented. Bakudo 75, Goktekken. Anohana cast the iron pillars on top of her own location and then wall jumped up them, and with an air bounce leapt over the tower wall of flames, only to be blinded by Minajiki's blinding flash from the white head. In the next instant the green head and the red head combined their attacks with the blue head and pretended to fell Anohana in one blow. The combined blast tore straight through Anohana. Not. The only thing left behind from Minajiki's assault was a torched Kosid and Shitajai. Anohana now stood behind Minajiki with her violet bra now being the only article of clothing on her person. Utsasimi, Anohana explained to her confused Zanpakuto. Without turning to face Minajiki she swung outward, imbuing her broken sword with spiritual power and severed the blue head from Minajiki's body. Reaching back Minajiki attacked Anohana with all heads except the red one, but Anohana vanished with Shunpo. Anohana had the advantage in that she was small and quick. While Minajiki's heads could reach her from all angles, its lower body was excessively slow and had no special properties to it. It was the spirit's weak point. The problem was managing to sneak past the ominous heads and deliver a decisive cut. As Anohana circled around Minajiki's left flank back towards its front, the red head crashed through the high-rising building behind Anohana and exhaled a torrent of fire at her. She retreated down towards the ground, whereupon the green head tore up through the ground, making its neck phantasmal, but its head solid as it tried to chomp at her. It missed breaking skin, but it tore a portion of Anohana's right pant leg with it. Hado 54, Hyene. Anohana smashed the green serpentine cranium in the nasal area and landed down in front of her Zanpakuto as it took a few steps towards her before using its regrown blue head to dive down and attack her. Before the head reached her though, Anohana let fly a sword swing and the Ryotsu charged in her strike split the head in half. As she did so, Anohana's head hurt and she clutched her forehead. She was reaching the limit to which she could expel the Ryotsu at her disposal and keep the Bakudo she had cast earlier active. Would she have to release more energy? She had released 75% of her limit in order to face off against Minajiki. Would she have to use all of it? The thought terrified her. All of it meant going back to how she was. She might not ever be the pacifistic individual that she was if she went completely all out. No, she thought and looked at Minajiki and its 5 bobbing heads. I must be willing to do whatever is deemed necessary for the sake of the Godai. Anohana concentrated and chanted away the last artificial restraint on her power. Minajiki waited and watched her master transform. Anohana's muscles pulsed and her eyes went back from red to blue. Now that she was fully released, there were no restraints on her power and therefore the energy that needed to be expelled, could be expelled. Instead her cheeks flushed and Anohana smiled joyously. This is what you wanted, right Minajiki? Anohana asked. You wanted me to go all out, so here I am, alive before your eyes. Anohana began to walk forward slowly and as Minajiki attacked her. The red head prepared to blast Anohana with its flames, but Anohana used Shunpo to get underneath it and cut the head clean off with a quick arcing slash. The white head tried to blind her, but with a stabbing motion it was split wide open and Anohana continued to approach. The green head came toward her, but Anohana walked through it as if it was merely the wind by way of slashing down and splitting it in half. The black head tried next, but Anohana slashed the mouth clean in half and then, from her position, did the same to the blue head before it could even launch itself off with a two-handed diagonal slash. She even managed to wound Minajiki's other wing. Minajiki prepared to run with its legs as its heads regenerated, but it didn't get very far before it reached the end of Anohana's barrier. With a crazed smile, Anohana grabbed the tip of the creature's tail and flipped Minajiki onto its stomach and leapt onto the soft stomach of Minajiki with the same crazed smile, cheeks still flushed. Hado 31, Shakkeiho. Anohana punctured a big hole in Minajiki's stomach. Shakkeiho. 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 She became excited with each new burn hole in the currently headless creature. She then began carving Minajiki up like a turkey on a platter. Blood splattered the 4th Division captain again and again as she slashed her Zanpakuto spirit up, reveling in the splash caused by each slash until finally there was nothing left to cut. Blood was all around her, covering her body in its entirety. Anohana closed her mouth, but her lips formed a crooked smile. She dropped her sword and pressed her blood-covered hand to her eye and laughed like mad. She felt alive with what she had just done, but the laughter slowly turned to sorrow, and as Anohana came down from her high, she realized what she had just been driven to. Her sanity came back to her and she dropped to her knees and started to cry. The Bakudo dispelled itself and Anohana, the excess energy she had been expelling, began to return to her as she came crashing down from the ecstasy she had just been experiencing moments ago. Her lunacy, her desire to inflict bodily harm and wildly laugh it off was still there, buried deep down. Anohana was scared and disheartened. She thought she had gotten better. She thought she was cured, but it was not so. Was that why Minajiki wanted her to go to such lengths, to prove to her that she still had those tendencies? Anohana sat on her knees sobbing and staring at the sky. The only way this could get worse was if Taeko. Anohana's eyes shot open. She looked over to where Isane was standing. The silverette was just outside the sea of blood. Something inside Anohana told her she should do something, erase Isane's memory of this, but her arms felt heavy and her legs nailed into the ground. Anohana felt very, very exposed. What are you doing here, Isane? Anohana asked feebly, lip quivering. I was waiting outside the Butyankan. I thought you might collapse after you won and thought you would need first aid, but, Isane looked at the scene, all this blood, she looked at her captain, and on top of that you're crying, she noticed Anohana's attire, and your Kosid and Shitajai are missing too. Isane brought her hands up by her face. Taeko, what happened? Anohana looked up at the sky, eyes squinted, tears in her eyes, but speaking normally. I lost my way. What do you mean? Isane was confused. It's unimportant. Anohana looked at the ground, eyes now closed, shamed for someone to see her like this. Isane started to make into the sea of blood towards her captain. What do you mean unimportant? This is very serious. I can't be ignorant of what happened here and don't come another step closer, Isane. Isane jumped. In the many years she had known her captain, this was the first time she had ever heard Anohana raise her voice. Isane's body was rigid like a lamppost in winter. Why yes ma'am. Rita-sama will be so disappointed in me, Anohana continued to cry, I'll never atone for the things I've done. As much as she didn't want to disobey her Taeko's orders, and no one disobeyed Anohana even if their life depended on it, Isane couldn't bear to watch her captain cry like a child, or more accurately possibly a mother that had just suffered a great loss. Eyes focused and confident, Isane remembered the wise words of Lelich. In dire situations, sometimes it's best to follow our hearts and dismiss authority, though we may regret it later and pay for it. There's no better feeling than knowing and believing that you've done the right thing. Isane nodded to herself and made towards Anohana. I said not to come closer. Anohana shouted at her again. She got to her feet. Don't you get it, Isane? Anohana spread her arms out above her head, broken sword still in hand. I'm a filthy murderer. I kill people and find enjoyment in the act. I find solace in rearranging organs outside a person's body after I've gutted them. I've never felt so alive in so many years. Anohana put her left hand on her eye and let her right arm drop at her side. If you come closer to me, if you don't leave right now, I'll kill you too and say you got caught in the crossfire. Taeko, Isane reached out. Stop. Anohana swung wildly and Isane was cut in the shoulder. The vice captain put her hand on the injury. Please Isane, Anohana pleaded, just go back to the barracks. I just need time to sort myself out. Anohana's hand was trembling. Isane defiantly took a step forward. You must really have a death wish. Itagumo chided. I know what I'm doing this time. Isane shot back. I've heard that before, Itagumo said coldly. I'm warning you. Anohana pointed her sword at Isane. Isane gave Anohana the most sincere smile she'd ever given her captain. She was extremely terrified, but Lelich had taught her how to separate her emotions and expressions. Taeko, please, I know you wouldn't mean to hurt me. I know, but I can't control myself right now, Isane. Anohana looked like she might cry again. I'm your vice captain, Taeko. Isane put her hands on her heart. I'm here for you. A vice captain and a captain's relationship is more than just a working one sometimes, you know? When you're feeling hurt or upset or even angry, there's nothing that says that a captain and their lieutenant can't be friends, any. Isane looked so cheerful, despite the fact that she was terrified and afraid that she would soon find her captain's blade in her chest, but her captain needed her, needed someone at least. Isane didn't think anyone knew this side of Anohana. Sure, many knew that she had a lot of psychosis, but no one was seeing what Isane saw right now, a woman desperately trying to salvage her broken soul to appease another. Rita-sama, Isane figured, was obviously the name of someone Anohana held close to her heart and was trying to, in some way, change for. There were many stories about her captain, none of them ever mentioned or alluded to the fact that Anohana Retsu had the capability of producing tears. Isane, Anohana's blade hand shook and Minajiki dropped from her hand. Isane held her arms out. "It's okay Teiko, come here." Isane welcomed her blood-covered shaking captain into her arms. Her captain needed support and Isane knew she would have to be there to support her. Her battle with her Zanpakuto had reopened a wound that had long since scarred over and Isane knew she needed to be there for the healing process, not just as a friend to her captain, or as her second-in-command, but as a duty as a member of the relief division. Isane knew that to help her captain along and be at her side, she had to make a very tough decision. She set it up in her mind to see Yuna after things had calmed down. After the injury and damage check, the first thing Hisuna did when she was left idle was rush back to the manor. With Anohana herself, for once, under care, Hisuna felt she could take the risk to rush back to check on her kids despite being injured. She was not prepared for the scene she walked in on. All of the servants were either unconscious or just coming to. A feeling of dread waved over Hisuna and she darted for her children's room. The cribs were empty and both blankets were missing. A blood stain spattered the wall by Isao's crib, blood dripped onto the crib itself and Kyo's as well. The blood trail led to outside. Hisuna became awash with fear. This isn't happening. This isn't happening. She panicked. She wrenched open the door to the outside and saw the blood leading into the grass towards one of the many family streams. Next to one of the rocks was Kyo's blanket. It was absolutely covered in blood. Some of it dry, some of it fresh, it depended on how much was in one particular spot. Hisuna was like a dead woman as she staggered towards the small blanket that wasn't bigger than a pillowcase. With trembling hands she picked it up. Her husband's Ryotsu was on it. Hisuna screamed in agony and despair at the top of her lungs. Meanwhile, Isane was visiting Yuna, to check on her injuries, but also to talk with her. When she told Yuna what was on her mind, the 7th Division captain was shocked. "Say that again?" Yuna asked, turning her head. "I said I have to refute my standing as a member of the house. I can't marry Lelich-kun and be stationed in a noble house while my captain is in the state that she's in. Teiko needs me and I need to be with her at all times, so that she can be the soft-spoken Anohana Teiko everyone adores, and fears," Isane said calmly. "I see." Yuna faced forward towards the wall, "It's not like it matters anyway." "What do you mean?" Isane asked. "I did some research in the library about noble houses. Even if Lelich's intentions are pure, even if it turns out this is all just some diabolical scheme, even if he's not prosecuted, the clan's status is in jeopardy. As a founder, he's not supposed to have any marks on his record. Word will spread, the other clans will find out. The House of Lamperouge is gone before it even begins," Yuna spoke frustratingly. "Homura Teiko," Isane stated. "He's such an idiot sometimes," Yuna shook her fists. "But that's why you love him, right?" Isane asked. Yuna blushed. "I like Lelich-kun a lot too, but, as I said, Teiko needs me and I still wanted that moment we had, just once." "Me too," Yuna wiped her eye and faced towards Isane, "but," she looked at her bed, "that's probably all I'm going to get." Susanna and Nemia have been around him for so much longer and Susanna didn't hesitate to show her loyalty to him. "He must hate me." Yuna lamented. That's not true. If Lelich-kun has some ulterior motive for what he's doing, he expects you to be yourself. That's what he told us when we were in the Phantoms, Isane stated. "It's just the same though," Yuna continued to wipe her eye. "I know he loves me, I know that, but Nemia and Susanna have had their eyes on his heart for much longer than I have. I was so obsessed with Mari-sama that I literally let it kill me. I have no right to just waltz back into his life and steal him from them. But Lelich-kun revived you because he cares about you, Homura Teiko." Isane gripped the side of the bed. "You shouldn't give up. I'll help you if you want, because everything Lelich-kun has done, especially after Aizen killed you, it was all on your honor, Homura Teiko. During the first battle Tremere-san called you a fool and Lelich-kun got really furious. I'd never seen him so angry before. Homura Teiko deserves Lelich-kun, just the way Lelich-kun should be happy." "And what if he doesn't pick me in the end?" Yuna asked. "What then?" "That, you face when you come to it, I suppose," Isane smiled and looked at Yuna, but Homura Teiko has a strong heart. I know that, even if you lose you'll pull through, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't fight for it. You love him, right? Yeah, Yuna nodded. She put on a serious face and clenched her fist, and when I see him, so help me, even if I have to pummel the answer out of him, I'm going to get answers. Isane smiled only for her soul pager to ring. Moshi Moshi, Isane answered her phone. Isane, could you please get me some water? I'm rather parched. It was Anohana on the other line. I'll be right with you, Teiko, Isane said and darted out the door. Yuna smiled and then stared at the ceiling. She pursed her lips and wondered about Lelouch. I know you're better than this, Lelouch, so just what is it that you're up to? Meanwhile, Susanna finally made it to the rendezvous point where Byakuya was currently waiting, but no Lelouch. Where's? Susanna started to ask. Byakuya knew here questioned before she asked it and responded, over by the waterfall off towards your right. He's asked not to be disturbed and we are to wait for him here. I see, Susanna said. At the waterfall, Lelouch was bent down by the pool of water the falls were filling up with 1 foot on a stone and all of his upper body clothing removed. He stared at his upper left arm and the slash wound along the outside of it. He had already cleansed the injury under the falls and was now tying off a piece of his haori that he had cut off using his Zanpakuto to the affected area. Off to the side a little was a large laundry basket with the rest of his haori thrown over it, covering the contents. He had fastened a makeshift handle to the basket using Kido. When he was certain his wound was properly treated, he picked up the basket with both arms, finding the 8-kilogram basket not much of a problem as it would have been when he was alive. Looking around to make sure there was no one nearby, he went behind the waterfall where there was a small cave. He walked a few steps to where there was a fork in the narrow pathway and then tapped against the crystalline wall. A presence shifted behind the wall. A lock of pink hair and a feminine hand could be seen in the semi-dark cave. Here, Lelouch lifted the basket to the presence currently in hiding. Take good care of them until the time is right. Don't let me down. Wordlessly, the female on the other side of the cavern corridor grabbed the handle of the basket and walked away. The click-clacking of high-heeled shoes echoed down the walkway. Lelouch then retreated out of the waterfall. He used his Kosud to dry his skin, and then put on his Shitagi, Kosud, and his prized Kido vest. He then checked for Ryutsus by the 4th Division barracks. Seems the fighting has finally stopped. It feels like everything went as it should. Lelouch was glad about that. He had sacrificed too much for his plan to fail. He knew the risk, no, not even the risk, the sacrifice, going in on this plan. Speaking of which, he had to let Susanna know. Rather than walking to her and asking Byakuya to politely give them some room, Lelouch used a hell butterfly and made Susanna come to him. The first thing she did was show concern for him. Lelouch Dono, what's wrong? I need to admit something to you, Lelouch told her. He explained to her about the consequences of his actions. Oh, I see, I had no idea. Susanna was very saddened to hear that. It meant that Lelouch and Nimue would. And I had to end things with Nimue, liability issues, Lelouch stated. Susanna's head snapped up, and Nimue-san, she? Yeah, she's in on it. Lelouch stated. Last night. 1 full hour before Iin Tamashi comes in contact with Susanna and Yuna. Quickly, but quietly, Lelouch trotted towards the Department of Research and Development and then made his way towards Nimue's office. He found her, as he expected, at her computer. He had done his best not to be picked up on camera and he could easily have his footage deleted by her even if he did make a mistake. Nimue was loyal to him. She would understand and he had to make her understand this. However, if necessary, Geese was most certainly an option here. He put his back to the wall by Nimue's room and poked his head inside to make sure she was busy. At this time of night Nimue was here rather than the front desk, rearranging data and checking Mayuri's records to make sure he was acting ethically, as well as doing the same for the rest of the researchers. As efficiently as he could, Lelouch stowed into her room, shut the door and clamped his hand over Nimue's mouth. She gasped at first, but his voice calmed her down. Nimue, relax, it's me. Nimue saw Lelouch's imperfect reflection through a nearby glass object and her tension was immediately lost. Lelouch-sama. She smiled behind his hand covering her mouth. Nimue, listen to me very carefully. Lelich spoke directly into Nemiu's ear, talking in a whisper indicating that what he was saying was for her ears only. I'm about to explain some things to you and I need you to not make any sudden movements, sounds or anything. Nod if you understand. Nemiu nodded. Okay, good, now, listen to me carefully. Lelich explained to Nemiu his plan with Byakuya and the consequences. With the clan deconstructed as such though, records and rumors indicate that you and I were together before that started. To make sure that you are not taken into custody as a liability by a mandate from the Central 46, I need to break up with you again. The shock and pain in Nemiu's eyes were easily felt by the trembling in her cheeks. Nemiu, relax, Lelich spoke calmly, I'm sorry, but, that's just how it has to be. I love you, I hope you know that, but, in times of crisis, I'm always going to have to keep the ones I love, at an arm's length. It's because I love you that I don't want you ever used as leverage against me. It's not that I don't think I can't protect you and it's not that I don't love you. I just don't want to see you used, that goes for the others too. I thought I could solve the situation by marrying you all, but it turns out that would only make things worse. A tear rolled down Lelich's cheek. Maybe one day I finally will settle down with one of you, but the chaos has to stop. Lelich let go of Nemiu's mouth and turned around to go. Erase all evidence that I was here and pretend I was never here after the fact, don't let the others know. Lelich-sama, Nemiu got up and grabbed Lelich from behind, putting her head on his shoulder and wrapping her arms underneath his shoulders. Lelich smiled at her, the dried tear lines glistening as he looked at the warm, loving hug that Nemiu was giving him. He turned around and gave Nemiu a long passionate goodbye kiss. I'll return Nemiu, stay safe, he told her and then retreated into the darkness and disappeared into the night. Present day. So you'll never settle down. Susanna was sad. Not until the chaos stops. I must make sure that there is nothing in my way, that there can be many years guaranteed that nothing like Aizen, Talbumasuk, or Muramasa will happen, Lelich answered. That's not fair Lelich Dano, for once Susanna was speaking her mind out against him. I know I said I would let you use me how you see fit, but you can't drag the others around and toy with them like that. And it's not right to instill false hope in me either. I don't expect anything, but to remove that chance altogether is. Lelich shut her up by kissing her. He spoke when they broke away. Like I said, I don't want any of you used, but, at the time, I guess I didn't know that, you would always be at my side, no matter what, but, if one day you wake up and I'm not there, that is the day I dread. Susanna leaned into Lelich and nuzzled into him. That day will never come. I'll always be at your side so long as you'll let me be there. Lelich closed his arms around Susanna. I'm really lucky to have your affection, he said as he stroked her silver hair. There aren't many who would follow the one they love no matter what it is they would do, all people have their standards. It warms me in ways that you cannot imagine that I have this from you. I don't know who I will make my future with in the end, but right now, Susanna, Lelich said and tilted her head up to look at him with her silver locks in his palm, I know I need you right now. Lelich Dano, the two kissed by the waterfall with Susanna moaning all the way through it. The man she loved really knew how to pull her heartstrings and make her feel like she was the luckiest girl in the world. By the way, Lelich said to Susanna, I was watching your combat with Rangiku and the others very closely, that was some excellent acting on your part. Why you praise me too highly, Susanna blushed speaking in a high-pitched voice, I was only borrowing my inspiration from the many times you've talked down to so many criminals and from the villainous I've read about in fairy tales. And besides it was nothing compared to what you could have done. Lelich found it so cute how easily he could embarrass the Silverette. 1 minute she was all in the romantic moment, and here, at the very next shy and timid like a schoolgirl with a crush. It was still a good performance and that's why I'm glad that I have your loyalty, he said, holding her hand. Come on, we need to get going. Ah yes, Susanna agreed. He's holding my hand. She squealed in her head. He said I acted well. She squealed again. The pair stopped holding hands a little bit before Byakuya came into view with Lelich walking in front. I can't believe you had me do that, Byakuya said to Lelich, referring of course to the incident at the manor. These are the sacrifices we must make, Lelich told him, now come, Muramasa is expecting us. The trio started to walk off. Iin Tamashi materialized and floated alongside her master. He's going to be pissed that you lost us so many valuable assets to our team. Oh, that's nothing to worry about. A little magnificent speech from yours truly and I'll be cleared of all problems. Besides, even a great mind like mine can have setbacks. The plan works perfect on paper, that's how I've always set it up. Just watch yourself, some of the other Zanpakuto are smarter than their masters. They might catch on, Iin Tamashi warned. They won't, Lelouch told her, because once this next phase clears itself the Zanpakuto rebellion will be over, he grinned. To be continued. Chapter 103, Iin Tamashi flips the board. Third-person POV. Lelouch, Byakuya, Susanna, and Iin Tamashi arrived all back at the Sokyoko Cavern shortly before the sun began to get low upon the horizon. As expected, Muramasa opened his mouth to Lelouch. Do you realize how many of our comrades you cost us with that little charade? Muramasa pressed his nails to his forehead, eyes closed. Lelouch of course had a way of getting out of trouble. You make it sound like you won't be able to free the Zanpakuto again now that they've been reclaimed. Don't worry though, once you reunite with Koga your power will increase and it'll make it easier to free the Zanpakuto, and between your power and mine we can once again free the Zanpakuto from the Soul Reapers. Muramasa smiled. Yes, I suppose that's true. Unlike your power, my power is not limited to a one-time effect. But now what do we do now that we've lost Fumetsu Seishin no Senso? Wasn't the plan for he and Kurosaki Ichigo to break the barrier together? Senbonzakura asked. I have a better idea, and once it comes to fruition we will have two of the most powerful beings in the entire Soul Society under our control. Lelouch grinned devilishly. He chuckled and then laughed aloud. The Soul Reapers will never know what hit them. So then what's our next move? Mio Okamai wanted to know. Nothing, we simply have the enemy come to us. After all, that's precisely what they'll do, Lelouch chuckled. Very well, I hope that things will go less catastrophically than they did last time, Muramasa stated gruffly. What happened with the last batch we lost was just bad luck, and that's always been a bane of mine. Of course, the human spirit is a powerful thing. Resolve is a force more powerful than even the deepest hatred or will to destroy. Even against insurmountable odds, one's resolve is the limit to one's spirit and can sometimes mean the difference between life and death, Lelouch stated. I suppose that's true, Muramasa stated and walked away towards the back of the cavern. Meanwhile, with the outside of the 4th Division looking like the aftermath of nuclear warhead detonation, the inside meeting room, where Anohana would sometimes spend many meetings with her senior officers discussing performances, policy changes, and all that fun stuff, was being used as the location of the current strategy meeting. As there were many injured from the last battle, the current group only consisted of Stefan, Kendra, Yolanda, Naomi, Izuru, Isane, Hitsugaya, Renji, Yuna, Jin, Ryu, Yumichika, Kayan, Rukia, Ichigo, and Tatsuki. Since Hisuna will not be joining us, Yuna started off the meeting. I will step up to take temporary charge. Why? What happened to Nae-san? Rukia wanted to know. I'll tell you later, Rukia, if I tell you now, Isane started. Rukia cut her off, slamming her palms on the table with a glare at the 4th Division lieutenant. What happened? Your niece and nephew are dead, Isane said sorrowfully. Stunned faces appeared all around the room. I'm sorry, Rukia. Isane said to her as Rukia fell backwards into her chair, her expression completely confused and the shocked expression on her face was not fading. No bodies were found, Isane continued, and Hisuna Taiko is having me run tests to make sure of their demise, forensic analysis, and the like, but she's in a state of shock. We have her in a care ward. She's more petrified than you are right now. Nae-san, Rukia got out, still in quite a bit of shock, but knowing that her sister had to be in so much more pain. Hisuna had worked too hard and put up with so much in her life, she had to be in quite the sorry state given that both of her children were killed. Do we know by whose hand this was done? Renji asked. We're still trying to determine that, Isane replied. What do we do now? Izuru inquired. Ichigo rose to his feet, speaking in a serious, surly tone, what we should have done from the start. We take this battle to them. Ichigo, they'll be expecting that, Kayan told him, glancing up at his younger cousin, that's the dumbest thing we can do. Lives were lost. Ichigo shouted, banging his right fist on the table. His glare was much more menacing than anything anyone had ever seen from the teen. Muramasa will pay, he spoke darkly, I'll kill him with my own 2 hands. This'll sound crazy coming from me, but going in with a small force just might work, Kendra spoke up. You can't be serious, Kayan stated in disbelief. Did I stutter? Kendra folded her arms. I'm inclined to agree actually, Stefan put his thumb and forefinger to his chin, a small force could go in on sight quickly and quietly enough and raid the remainder of the group. The only enemies that need to be watched out for are Kiraku and Yuka take Teiko's Zanpakuto, plus there's Hire and Meru, but other than that all of the captain-class Zanpakuto have been recovered. Let's not forget there's also the possibility of Ryujinjaka waiting in the wings, Yumi Chika put in. Yuna disagreed, no, if Muramasa had his hands on Ryujinjaka he would have already sent it out. No matter how hard we tried we'd be done in if he got loose. Why? How bad could he be? Ichigo asked with natural curiosity. Yuna gave Ichigo a stern look. He is more powerful than Minajiki and Fumetsu Seishin no Senso put together, of that much you can be certain. Uncomfortable looks of agreement and understanding were thrown about the room. Ichigo, Yumi Chika, Isane, and Kayan all swallowed as well. Disregarding the disturbance, Yuna looked at Kendra. You said something about a small force. Ah, yes, the lieutenant stepped forward, arms folded, if no one else I'll go with the substitute Soul Reaper Kurosaki Ichigo. Under my watchful eye even he can be made to go in with stealth. I'm coming too, Tatsuki put in, I've always been Ichigo's backup. As will I, Yolanda stated. And me, Naomi jumped up, I'm Onisama's backup. Then the 5 of us will go, Kendra stated. That's not gonna work, a crafty voice from the left side of the room spoke up. Jin. Hitsugaya glanced in the 9th Division Lieutenant's direction. Even if Ya go in completely invisible, someone like Lelich would be expecting such a thing. Ya need a decoy force, that way even if he knows you're coming he'll be forced to put only the bare minimum on Ya, likely leaving himself and Muramasa for you guys, Jin stated. I'll rally my division, stealth isn't the squad's forte, but making noise sure is, Yumi Chika affirmed. With your captain down for the count, momentarily, I'll lead the charge. Just because I can fight with sleekness doesn't mean I can't create a storm or two, Stefan put his hand on the hilt of his blade. Those without their Zanpakuto should join the decoy team, Yuna suggested, it's likely they will be the ones asked to defend the area. But how are we going to get into Sokioka Cavern if the entrance is a war zone? Yolanda asked. There's a back entrance along Sokioka Hill's staircase, Isane responded, I'll get a map and I can show you where it is. Then it's settled then, Ichigo stated, let's rest up for a few hours and then make our move. We should attack while the enemy has their guard down. The rest of his group seemed to be in agreement. A few hours later. The sun had begun to set. It would be dark soon. Ichigo was finishing suiting up in the outfit that Kendra had given him to put on. It was a slim, form-fitting black robe that went over his shiakusho, complete with a face mask that covered everything below his eyes. Ichigo was already in Bankai so while his long coat still flapped out behind him, at least his Ryutsu wasn't leaking everywhere like it would have without the form-fitting clothes. After helping Tatsuki adjust the fitting of the uniform around her breasts, and keep it from being flammable in the face of Tatsuki's fiery destruction, Kendra checked up on Ichigo. I feel like a ninja in this, Ichigo commented about the suit. The term you're looking for is assassin, Kendra folded her arms. The Soul Society didn't have a proper term for ninjas. Geez, what is it with you guys? Ichigo spoke through the face mask, half the words I use back home I get a blank stare back here. For a place with high technology one can't even fathom why Rukia was perplexed by a juice box. We actually integrated those into our lifestyle after the incident with Aizen. Rukia-san was a member of the proud Kukaki family and when she speaks sometimes Hisuna listens, Kendra smirked. We're always looking to take in pieces of living world culture, customs, and tech we think would prove beneficial to our lifestyle, though we seem to enjoy the mostly traditional lifestyle of feudal Japan, a lifestyle of which many other worlds base their culture around. Yeah, I hear you, Ichigo rubbed the back of his neck. By the way, thanks for backing up my idea. You don't need to thank me, it was a good idea. It just needed a little tweaking, Kendra said without a moment of hesitation. I think there's more to it than that, Ichigo said to her. He rubbed his head, Sensei's always telling me I'm always impulsive. Ichigo looked at Kendra seriously. I was enraged when I heard about my cousins, but now that I'm thinking clearly, I want to know, why did you endorse my idea? You're not the only one to ever suffer great loss, powerless to stop it. It's something we share in common, Kendra stated. What was it in your case? Ichigo asked. My older sister, Kendra stated, Otamaki Takako. She was the 8th seat of Lelich's division, back when Yuna's predecessor, Akari Mari was captain of Squad 10. This was long before Urahara Kisuke ever became captain. My sister was on a mission with several other officers. They ran into trouble and she sent a formal request for backup, but the response was delayed due to red tape. I wanted to make sure, when I joined the GODI 13, that nothing like my sister ever happened again, though it seems like I've failed in that right on multiple counts. Kendra looked down. Ichigo put a comforting hand on her shoulder. We're only human. We can't be Superman or woman and say something like, we'll make sure nothing like that ever happens again. All we can do is to try and save as many as we can. The harsh reality of life is that we can't protect everyone, but it's not enough to say that we'll protect only those close to us. To do justice is to protect those we can, those we cannot protect, those outside the blade we use to block for them, are the ones that we simply were not meant to protect. It's unnecessary to despair over the lives of a stranger you've never met or weren't around for, but to not be able to save someone suffering right in front of you is a failure. That's really deep. Kendra was entranced by Ichigo's poetic speech. She smiled behind her face mask. You know, for a substitute you're a pretty okay guy, Ichigo. Huh? What do you mean? Ichigo scratched his head. Well, past experience leads us to believe that substitutes were always trouble, but you have many qualities we respect in a Soul Reaper, Kendra explained. Is that so? Ichigo beamed. Kendra nodded, but then furrowed her brow, folded her arms and thought a moment. Well, maybe it's a little premature to say so, but we'll see what this mission brings. Well, alright then, Ichigo grinned. Ichigo noticed that he and Kendra had been talking a while. What are we waiting for anyway? Yolanda's going to give us a signal before we head out after the Zanpakuto, Kendra stated. Oh, I gotcha, Ichigo acknowledged. By the way, if you don't mind me asking, why do you still mingle with society? Kendra asked. What do you mean? Ichigo wanted to know. Well, word's gotten around about how you got your powers back after Hisuna defeated you. That being the case, it means you're not a substitute Soul Reaper. Not really anyway, Kendra stated. Ichigo was confused. I'll explain. Kendra turned to face her ally. Substitute Soul Reapers are born from the transferal of power from a donor Soul Reaper to a regular human. Normally substitutes can only receive a partial amount of power from Soul Reapers to their bodies. After a while the Soul Reaper regains their power and the substitute Soul Reaper goes back to being a normal human. Usually this process will only last about a month or so, though it is still widely considered a high-class crime. Or rather, it was at the time you came about. It's becoming a real pain in the ass to reformat the law book. Kendra stated. Ichigo cleared his throat. Right, getting off topic. Anyway, the formation of a substitute should only last a month or two, and we've had plenty of cases like this. However, most times it flew under the radar. In very rare circumstances though, like your own, all of the power was transferred to the host body from the donor body, and after the destruction of the Soul Reaper the donor body was punished through exile or sometimes lengthy incarceration. However, in one other case besides your own, the substitute regained his power through different means and became a natural Soul Reaper, but with a living body. In essence, while he was still acting out of GODI principle, he was still a normal Soul Reaper. That meant he got all of the fun side effects that came with it, like slower aging, Kendra explained. Wait, so then? Ichigo panicked. Kendra nodded. Your body may grow, you might live through the years, but after a certain point you'll retain your youth, usually at around 20 or 25, but there are plenty of cases where this is not so, like the head captain for example. Nevertheless, Soul Reapers live much longer than humans, especially humans where you come from, and so I ask you, Ichigo, why do you mingle with society? If you stay with a loved one, can you watch her grow old and gray while you stay the same age for what would seem like forever? Can you endure that pain? Ichigo reacted in panic, but I'm human, aren't I? He slapped his hand against his chest. My soul might be youthful, but my body. At the time of the severing of your soul chain, your body ceased being your body. Instead it became something like that of a Jigai. Since you were born human, though you will age up to a certain point, but you will stop eventually and show slower signs. Soul Reapers live a long time, some have lived for several millennium. Kendra stepped up next to Ichigo. She was a few inches shorter than him. She put a hand on his shoulder. I'm not saying this to upset you or make you panic. I'm saying this because I don't know if you knew the sacrifices you were making when you came to rescue Rukia-san. And if not, I want to know what you'll do. This is sort of a roundabout way of saying it, but, if you prove useful to us, when that time came, we would accept you as one of our own, Ichigo. It was true that Ichigo had visored powers, but unlike the rest of the vizards, he didn't have a mark on his record that needed to be retroactively erased, so his circumstances were different. Of course, this would mean also getting over his hollow issue with what he did during the first battle of Karakura Town. Ichigo seemed down and depressed for a little bit, but took himself out of it. No, he said, I'm not going to just leave the life I'm leading behind. I understand what you're saying, and I'm glad you told me that. I think Urahara-san left it out, because he knew it wouldn't change my decision to save Rukia. However, my dad, a Soul Reaper in his own right, married my mom, who was human. This past June, when we visited my mom's grave, my dad told me that he didn't dwell on the fact that he knew he'd outlive my mom and my sisters and me. He intended to cherish the time we had together. Life's too short to take it so seriously all the time. That's why I always try to loosen things up. Kendra smiled behind her mask again. That certainly sounds like Kurosaka Teiko. Yeah, but what bugs me is that he says stuff like that, led a responsible life as a Soul Reaper captain, and yet has to act like an idiot half the time and only says heartfelt things during that one really bad day of the year or when the atmosphere is really moody. I don't get it, Ichigo growled. You know, once we've gotten our hands on Lelouch, maybe you can ask him when things calmed down. He served under your father for quite a long time. He could tell you more than I can, Kendra told Ichigo. Lelouch, Ichigo scowled. He hadn't forgotten the man's betrayal and blatantly beat him down. This time for sure, Ichigo thought, he would be the one that was victorious. By the way, if that's your answer, then I'm glad we got you as the next permanent substitute. Like I said before, you're an okay guy, Kendra pat Ichigo's shoulder. Thanks Kendra, you're okay too, Ichigo complimented her. Kendra felt warm and fuzzy inside. Yup, just like Kurosaka Teiko. Only at least he doesn't brag his ability with women. I guess that makes him more like my Teiko, though he's nowhere near as cool Luska Teiko. Kendra folded her arms. Even if he did manage to win against him, Luska Teiko's still more. I believe the Earth term is badass in my opinion. Tatsuki suddenly appeared on the scene with Yolanda and Naomi at her side. Decoys in position, Yolanda told her Fukutaiko. She was suited up with her Shikai already active, same for Naomi. Kano-senpai and Kiraku Teiko won't be joining the decoy group, they're still Ina, Inkapla. Naomi couldn't get the right word out and spit with her tongue sticking out a little upon realizing this fact, incapacitated. Seisaka Fukutaiko is also still out cold and developing a fever from something the 4th Division does not yet have an idea of. I relayed this information to Teiko via Hell Butterfly One-sama. Alright then, Kendra said, taking all the information into her brain and soaking it up. She then whipped out her Zanpakuto. Kill from the shadows, Akuma Ansatsu. She looked at her comrades. Let's go. The quintet nodded and they all disappeared into the night. Meanwhile, back at the 4th Division, Isane was fast asleep at her workstation while she waited for the DNA test results to come back from the blood on Kyo's baby blanket. As Isane snoozed, the meter of completion ticked up. 98, 99, 100. Beep. 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 Fish cakes. Isane bolted upright with a jolt and leaned backwards and fell out of her chair. "Ate," she groaned as she rubbed her head as she prepared to get back up. She stood up, dusted herself off and then turned off the notification so she could examine the completed results. She scanned through it for a few minutes, but she didn't need to get more than a few strands in before she noticed a problem. Eyes focused with curiosity and suspicion, she brought up the DNA database and ran a check against 3 specific DNAs. As she expected, the search returned positive. A large, happy smile swept across Isane's face. Isane printed out the results and went to rush to tell Hisuna her findings. She banged on the door. "Hisuna-sama, I have something to tell you, open up." Isane was jittery as she continued to stare at the papers in her hand. "She'll be so happy. She'll light right up." When Hisuna didn't respond though, Isane threw the door open and gasped as Hisuna sat on her knees in the center of the room, top removed sword poised to stab herself. "Hisuna-sama." Isane rushed over and slapped Hisuna across the face to shock her, as it would be less dangerous than trying to wrench the sword free from her hands. Isane then looked behind the curtain that was drawn in front of the other bed in the room and found Kaze no Iriko bound to it by Kido. Isane undid it using her own Kido. "Thank you," Kaze no Iriko replied, massaging her wrists. "Any sooner and she would have really done it." Hisuna had her hands buried in her face, crying silently. Isane knew that Hisuna had lost almost all hope in herself. Byakuya had betrayed the 3rd Division captain and she lost her children, or so she believed. With the documents Isane had in hand, she knew Hisuna would brighten right up once she saw them. Isane knelt down in front of Hisuna. "Why did you stop me?" Hisuna sobbed into her hands. "Because I have something to show you." Isane put a hand on Hisuna's shoulder. "I don't care," Hisuna swatted it away. "You'll feel better," Isane tried to persuade her. Hisuna just whined. "Oh, for fuck's sake, look at the damn document, Hisuna," Kaze no Iriko complained. Still in deep depression, arm over her eyes, Hisuna held out her other arm to receive the pages. Isane handed them to her. While still sitting on her knees, Hisuna scanned them over. She became puzzled after the first gene comparison and then continued further down the page and then flipped pages and saw someone else's mug shot that was not her little Kyo as belonging to the DNA on the blanket. What's more, the DNA of the person whose blood was on the blade started to make a whole lot of sense to Hisuna. The noblewoman's hands shook with hope for the first time in the last third of a day and her voice trembled as she spoke. This is accurate." Isane nodded and tapped her finger to the unmatched DNA. "This was the only blood sample we have. And based on the crime scene." Hisuna reached out and grabbed Isane's shoulders without warning, causing the tinsel-haired lieutenant to yelp. "What's going on right now?" Hisuna's face was one of hope and excitement, as if she couldn't wait to leave the division once she understood the situation. The whole thing scared Isane a little. Kurosaki Ichigo and Kendra-san left with Naomi-san, Bermuda-san, and Arisawa-san a little while ago to infiltrate the Sokioka cavern. Lusuke Taiko is acting as leader of the decoy unit along with Keshiba-kun, Yasukawa-kun and most of Squad 11. That's it? That's all we've sent out. Hisuna wanted to make sure she had every last bit of information. A few of the other Soul Reapers, like Hichuga Taiko that haven't reclaimed their Zanpakuto, have gone out to get them back, but Kiraku Taiko, Kano-kun and Sasaki-kun are unfit for battle, Isane said. Hisuna took a deep breath and her joy turned to one of a more casual, thoughtful expression. "I see." Hisuna got to her feet. "I think I understand the situation pretty well now." She picked up Kaze no Iriko's sword self and urged her Zanpakuto to go inside it. Once she had done so, Hisuna discarded her hospital gown, grabbed her hakama and her kosud, having already been wearing her shitaji and her panties, put them on, following through with her tabi and waraji, and then grabbed her haori from off the back of the door and slid her arms through it. Where are you going?" Isane asked, getting to her feet. "I'm going to put this matter to rest. Send a message to the Shiba household about what you know." "I'm going to the Kukaki Manor," Hisuna said, and her gaze turned to a glare. "What for?" Isane asked. "No time to explain. If anyone, like your captain, asks, tell them I'm following my own tuition," Hisuna said, and ran out of the room and down the hall. "Ah, Hisuna-sama, no running in the medical wing," Isane called after her, but Hisuna was already long gone. It was as if she had sprouted wings and there was wind blowing underneath them. She knew what she had to do and she knew where she needed to be. It was just a matter of doing it. With confident eyes she made her way to her home. Meanwhile, on the battlefront, Ichigo and the others had successfully infiltrated the Sokioka cavern. However, as expected, they weren't given a warm welcome with gift baskets and party streamers. Susanna, Katen Kyokotsu, Mio Okamai, and Gonryomaru all stood to block their path. "There's 5 of us and 5 of them," Tatsuki said, "let's do this." "Oh, actually, Kurosaki Ichigo is allowed to pass right through," Katen stated. "We're all here to stop anyone else from getting any farther." "How is 5 against 4 a fair fight?" Naomi asked. "No, wait, look closely," Yolanda pointed out to Katen and Kyokotsu's weapons. "That's Kirakuteiko's Zanpakuto, no doubt about it. They might be separate bodies, but they're still one Zanpakuto." "Who are the others?" Kendra asked Yolanda. However, it was Susanna who answered. She gestured to the wolfen girl. "This is Kano Ashido's Zanpakuto, Mio Okamai." She gestured to the man who looked even more Japanese than Ichigo did, "and this is Sasakib-san's Zanpakuto, Gonryomaru." "Tatsuki, you take Kirakuteiko's Zanpakuto, you're probably the only one who can," Kendra told her. "Right," Tatsuki nodded. "Naomi, Mio Okamai," Kendra told her. "You got it, Onisama," Naomi responded and brought her Zanpakuto to its sleeker state immediately. "Yolanda, you take Gonryomaru and keep your distance," Kendra told her. "Can do," Yolanda stated. "Which leaves you to fight me," Susanna grinned. "I suppose that's the wisest choice." "Be careful, Ichigo," Kendra told him, "if they're letting you ahead then." "Yup, probably a trap, not like we have much choice though." Ichigo gripped his blade and then burst out of the Onmitsukido robes so that he could unleash the full extent of his Ryutsu. The stealth suit had done its job anyway. Well, at the very least they got into the cavern. "We'll start when he's out of range," Susanna dictated. "Let's split up, I don't want anyone interfering with my fight." Yolanda rested her assault rifle on her shoulder. "Then follow me, woman," Gonryomaru told her. The rest of the group all took off out of the cavern in different parts of the Siriti in order to do battle. Ichigo carried on ahead towards Muramasa, using Lelich's Ryutsu, since he could sense it, to guide him. After he made it over a few pools of water, Ichigo finally found Iin Tamashi waiting for him further in. "You!" he glared. The redhead simply smirked and retreated backwards. Ichigo chased after her, following her, making sure to let her lead him, while keeping a safe distance from her to make sure he wasn't about to walk into an ambush. Of course, to be able to have visual on Iin Tamashi, watch where he was going, check for traps and keep his eyes open for an ambush was a lot harder than it needed to be. Nevertheless, Ichigo kept on her, but suddenly in a flash she disappeared via teleportation. Ichigo stopped short, but by the time he stopped he was confronted with the image of Yamamoto Shijikuni Genri Yusai inside a giant pyramid barrier with the 2 spirits that made up Sogyo no Kotori on either side of the barrier. "Ah, he's arrived," one of the boys said. "He took long enough," the other one quipped. "All right, you brats, what have you done with the old man?" Ichigo barked. "They've done nothing," Iin Tamashi's voice came from behind Ichigo, "and you've walked right into my trap." Ichigo's head whipped around as he saw Iin Tamashi standing behind him. Suddenly she pinned him to the ground and the geese emblem appeared in her eye. She pressed down on his neck hard enough with her thumbs to prevent him from closing his eyes. She was smiling similarly to how Anohana used to whenever she carved people up. "From this moment forth you are under my complete control and will do everything I tell you to do." The geese took effect and Ichigo's fierce eyes turned dull with obedience. Iin Tamashi got up off of him and rose her hand, gestured her hand upward. "Stand," she commanded. "Hi," Ichigo responded and did as he was asked. "Now then, let out your inner hollow, transform into your ultimate form," Iin Tamashi commanded. "Hi," Ichigo responded. Only with the geese was this possible. Lelich and Iin Tamashi figured that Ichigo would only let his hollow have control of his body and transform if he was forced to do it, and with his body currently one entire soul, all 4 pieces of Ichigo's soul were forced to carry out the commands Iin Tamashi gave to Ichigo. The teen dropped all of his defenses and began to transform. His skin turned bony white and horns extended from his head. He contorted and morphed until he stood in his ultimate form. Of course, even with all of that immense power, despite having the brains no more than a jillion, Ichigo was still under Iin Tamashi's influence and could not break it. In fact, his weak mind made him that much easier to control. With the demon within Ichigo finally loose, the time had come to execute the next phase of the plan. Iin Tamashi extended her arm out like a commander giving orders, aiming her middle finger at Yamamoto. Now my slave, destroy that barrier. Shatter it completely. Hi, Ichigo was forced to carry out the command, and with two full-powered Getsuga Tenshos shattered Yamamoto's barrier completely. No more than 10 seconds after its shattering did flames erupt around Yamamoto, and Muramasa's influence, delayed for so long, finally took effect. Ryujinjaka finally emerged, and he was the biggest Zanpakuto spirit anyone had ever seen. He was so large that he effectively tore through the ceiling and all 3 layers of the cavern, revealing that particular portion of the cavern was a few dozen meters from Sokioka Hill. Stefan saw this from his location as he turned his head away from the battle he had been orchestrating. He saw Ryujinjaka emerging and he felt fear. "Oh crap," he said aloud, wincing with one eye. Ryujinjaka was covered in flames, making its form undistinguishable. However, the gigantic fireball began to split and morph, and soon Ryujinjaka began to take a stable form. Ryujinjaka's body was composed completely of hardened magma lava, and the rest of his body was composed of glowing lava. He had 4 legs, each with 2 claws in front and 1 behind. Each leg was twice as thick as your average tree trunk and stood taller than quite a few trees to begin with. His neck's length was, in proportion to the rest of the body, like that of a giraffe's and not connected directly to the torso. Ryujinjaka's had 10 horns on either side of its elongated, rectangular head, and the horns were shaped like the 10 different blades Yamamoto used when he fought Talbumasuke. His mouth had rows upon rows of sharp teeth and a reptilian tongue. On Ryujinjaka's forehead was a glistening green jewel shaped like the face of the bearded troll that had risen out of Yamamoto's back. Ryujinjaka had a tail that was twice the length of his neck and terminated in a spearhead tip. Ryujinjaka also had wings that were tattered towards the bottom, but if spread out they would reach from the Sokioka Hill to the Senteikyo, with the beast itself being able to perch itself on top of said hill. Simply put, Ryujinjaka was a huge-ass magma-skinned dragon with lava traced along the intended lines on his body. His initial instinct, finally free from Yamamoto, was to do as his release command dictated: reduce all creation to ash. To be continued. Chapter 104, Iin Tamashi, Lelich's Herald. Third-person POV. Ryujinjaka let out a celebratory roar in light of his newfound freedom and then proceeded to exhale his initial breath of flame, setting the Sokioka forest ablaze. Many Soul Reapers that were battling the still-free Zanpakuto were burned alive, rather they would have if not for the sudden sprouting of ice around the forest. Hichuga Yatashiro had Hirin Meru under control, and he would be damned if anyone died from an intentional forest fire. Muramasa laughed, "Such power. Ryujinjaka really is the most powerful Zanpakuto in all of the Soul Society." "Muramasa," Yamamoto glared at him. The ground shook fiercely, signaling that Ryujinjaka had moved one of his gigantic legs. Yamamoto prepared to strike, but with a signal from Iin Tamashi, Ichigo barred his path. "Yes, you shouldn't attack my bodyguard Yamamoto Genryusai. You know you stand not a chance against a beast of his caliber without your Zanpakuto," Muramasa chuckled. Yamamoto gnashed his teeth in anger. As much as he was loath to admit it, with Ryujinjaka separated from him, he stood no chance against Ichigo in his current form. "Good, now stay put like a good defeated leader," Muramasa laughed. Iin Tamashi took the skies to go after Ryujinjaka. The ground shook inside the now open cavern as the beast landed atop Sokioka Hill and roared. The remainder of the Sokioka's stand turned to splinters from the sonic waves caused by the roar. Iin Tamashi got close enough to Ryujinjaka so that she could see his eyes, but was outside his Ryutsu barrier. "Obey me," she commanded. And just like that, she now had both Ichigo and Ryujinjaka under her command. "Let go of your rage, reduce your destructive power, condense yourself." Ryujinjaka let out a moaning roar, but did as he was told and reduced his size to become big enough to fit inside the back of the cavern where he had originally spawned from. Like this, he expelled less energy to the outside, but any attack coming from him would come at the same strength regardless of his size. Iin Tamashi rubbed Ryajanjaka on the head as if he were a pet. Iin Tamashi looked over Muramasa's shoulder to a figure she knew was standing in the shadows. Hey, when this is all over, let's make Ryajanjaka our pet. Now, Iin Tamashi, Lelich chuckled, do you know how expensive it is to feed a dragon? Lamp-Rouge Lelich, Yamamoto scowled. Hello Suteiko, Lelich greeted, it's about time you joined the party. Just what are you scheming? Yamamoto scowled. Exactly the same thing that I am. Byakuya stood at Lelich's side. Yamamoto opened his eyes fully. Byakuya, he started to get an understanding of what was going on, but was Lelich fully inclined to go along with Byakuya's plan, or did Lelich plan to take things in a different direction? After all, he had control of two of the most powerful forces in all of the Soul Society. With a simple command from his Zanpakuto, everyone could burn or be disintegrated. You should all head out, leave things here to me, Lelich said as he rubbed his left shoulder. You're not coming with us? Muramasa asked. It's for the best, Byakuya stated. We must maintain our control here in the world of the living, and Lelich has command of the otherwise chaotic Ryajanjaka and the destructive form of Kurosaki Ichigo. Rest assured we are fine leaving things in his hands. I see, then let us make haste. Muramasa, Byakuya, and Senbonzakura began to leave. Iin Tamashi looked at the two entities under her command and waited until Muramasa was out of earshot before giving the command. You two are to obey Lelich's every command, no matter what they are. They are to supersede my orders, and with that control of Ichigo and Ryajanjaka switched from Iin Tamashi to Lelich. Good, now, catch up with them, Lelich told Iin Tamashi. She nodded and rushed to catch up to Byakuya, Muramasa and Senbonzakura. Lamp-Rouge Lelich, are you really on Byakuya's side? Or are you going to use those two to commit to your hostile takeover? Yamamoto inquired. As I thought, even after all this time, you don't trust me, do you? Lelich asked him. I could never forget what you've done as Zero. Your ambition is strong, I've always been wary of you, and now you've stacked the deck completely in your favor. Right now, if you dare so chose to conquer the Soul Society, with those two beasts under your command, no one could oppose you, Yamamoto made that clear to Lelich. No one could oppose me, you say, Lelich said and gestured for his companions to stand behind him. That's certainly an interesting thing worth noting. However, Lelich suddenly turned on his feet and thrust out his arm. I request you both, regain your true selves. In the next instant, Ryajanjaka and Ichigo were both freed from both Iin Tamashi and Lelich's control. Ryajanjaka calmed down and became rather docile as a gigantic magma dragon could be, and the hole in Ichigo's chest sealed up and he dropped to his hands and knees as he regained his sanity as he collapsed upon the ground. As Ryajanjaka calmly stomped around Lelich and Yamamoto's right to stand behind his master, Yamamoto stared at Lelich. Why you? I've done my part, the rest is up to Byakuya, Lelich stated. Ichigo finally came to and, acting on instinct, charged at Lelich. Yamamoto promptly blocked him. You've taken over the old man too? What the hell is wrong with you? Ichigo shouted at Lelich. Quiet boy, Yamamoto snapped, no one controls me, he flung Ichigo off him. I only stopped you from making a grave mistake in your judgment. Mistake? What are you talking about? Ichigo shot back. A faint smile appeared on Yamamoto's face. Lelich has done, as he always has, manipulated the environment and set up the best possible outcome. Exactly, Lelich said, and now the final is about to commence. Ichigo was still confused. It will take some time to explain it to you, Yamamoto stated and turned towards his Zanpakuto. Ryajanjaka, Yamamoto nodded to his companion, who nodded back and then lowered his wing for Yamamoto to climb aboard. Lamp-Rouge Lelich, Yamamoto said as he stood on top of Ryajanjaka's back as the dragon proceeded to get bigger, it is good to know where you stand. Yamamoto then ordered Ryajanjaka to take to the skies and go to Sokioka Hill. He intended to end the fighting with a speech through the use of Bakudo 77 and explain the events as he understood them to the Gotei. What the hell did I miss? Ichigo shouted. I'll explain it to you, Lelich told him. Oh, like I'm really in any mood to listen to you after what you did, Ichigo stated and aimed Tensou Zanjutsu at Lelich's jugular. give me one good reason why I shouldn't cut you down where you stand. I'll give you two, Lelich said and looked into the shadows of the cave. You can come in now. You don't have to hide anymore. Lelich requested. Ichigo watched as, of all spirits, Takubikiri Tamashi stepped forward. And for anyone that might have been confused, Lelich had prepared a fake sealed version of the woman when he defeated her, far in advance. However, it wasn't the woman's beauty that Ichigo was drawn to. His eyes were drawn to the two cooing infants in her arms. Kyo, Isao. Ichigo was getting choked up. But how? Breathing rapidly, Ichigo rushed over and took Isao from Takubikiri Tamashi's arms. Lelich walked over to him and pulled his Shiakusho off of his shoulder to show Ichigo the injury he had covered up. A wound. Byakuya and I snuck into the Kukaki Manor during the fight earlier and strolled into Kyo and Isao's room. Lelich covered the wound back up and picked up Kyo into his arms. From there, I had Byakuya cut my arm and splattered the wall with my blood. Using Iin Tamashi's spirit, I controlled the amount I was bleeding until I got to the waterfall a ways away from here to ultimately conceal it, and I set up the perfect crime scene to make it seem like they had been killed. To what end? What's going on? Muramasa's master, Koga, is not dead, but sealed, and his seal is in Karakura town in the middle of the lake in Tsubakade Park, Lelich stated. Ichigo looked at Lelich like he had three heads. Despite the fact that he had lived in Karakura town all his life, he wasn't certain as to where Lelich was talking about. Lelich, realizing this, simply said, "The one with the big tree southeast of your house." Instantly Ichigo understood. Anyway, Koga is Byakuya's uncle and, on behalf of his grandfather, Byakuya is going to free Koga and kill him. I don't get it, why go through all the trouble? Why not just kill Muramasa and stop Koga's release? Ichigo stated. Because Byakuya didn't know where Koga was sealed. Only the Suteiko knew, as he was the only other person who orchestrated the sealing. We knew we could find out the Suteiko's location if we pretended to join Muramasa, but what we didn't expect was to find him sealed, so, Lelich took a brief pause, we improvised, and in doing so, knowing that you all would overcome your Zanpakuto, I orchestrated plans in a fashion to make them seem like they were brilliant schemes, but ultimately knew I was intentionally stabbing Muramasa in the back without him realizing it. You call all this improvisation? Ichigo was not pleased in the least. Everyone thinks Kyo and Isao are dead. As they should, otherwise we would have miscalculated, but, I knew that a DNA test would be administered, and I know that, in doing so, I've set up the perfect dynamic duo of which Koga will find himself completely decimated by. Lelich grinned as he turned around. Ichigo believed he understood Lelich's angle. There was only one person, other than Lelich, that Byakuya could conceivably fight well alongside. You mean? Yes, the two of them should be meeting face to face any minute now, Lelich stated. Karakura town. In the time it took Lelich to explain his plan to Ichigo, Byakuya, with Senbonzakura inside him, Iin Tamashi, and Muramasa had already found Koga's seal and broken it. The long-time sealed third seat was all brittle like an anorexic, and yet his riots irradiated fiercely, vice-captain class at least. Upon being released, however, the first thing Koga did was take his sword and stab Muramasa in the stomach, surprising Byakuya and Iin Tamashi as they watched the spirit drop to his knees. Koga, why did you? You didn't come, Koga said simply, even though I called for you as I was about to be sealed away. Muramasa's eyes widened in surprise. You called for me? It seemed as if Muramasa had never heard the command. You did not lend me your power, Koga glared. You were calling for me? Muramasa repeated, looking at his hands, wondering how he could have missed such an obvious declaration all those years ago. He distinctly remembered not hearing Koga at all. I never heard you, I swear. Muramasa looked solemnly at his master. I waited for you to call me for so long. Koga didn't seem to be buying it, despite the fact that it was the truth. I've always wanted to help you with all my body and soul, no matter how dire the situation, whenever you called for me. The wound in his stomach worsening, Muramasa bowed in front of his master. Byakuya watched the chain of events play out in wonder. His grandfather had mentioned to him that something was wrong with Muramasa on that day so many years ago, and Byakuya wanted to know what that was, and it seemed like he would get his answer. But I went so long without ever once hearing your voice. Eventually I found out that you had been sealed away. He looked up at his master. That's why I've been working to figure out a way to break the seal for so long. Muramasa reached out to Koga, so very long. Koga simply became infuriated. What's the point if you are not there when I really need you? He shouted. Koga removed his sword from Muramasa and kicked him, agitating Byakuya, but he continued to listen to Koga rant as his presence was continually ignored. As your Soul Reaper, I created your powers, Koga bared down upon Muramasa. You're supposed to do everything I tell you to do. Muramasa lifted his head up off the ground. Weren't we comrades? He asked hoarsely. Comrades? Koga scoffed. You're nothing more than a sword. You're just a tool. Don't be cocky, tool. Koga swung down. Byakuya was about to intervene, unable to watch Koga treat Muramasa like crap for another second, but suddenly a long, black whip went sailing through the air and grappled Koga's wrist. Byakuya and Iin Tamashi recognized the whip. It was impossible to mistake, especially since they could see the wielder of it standing on the water a few meters behind Koga. I can't believe your Zanpakuto a tool and attacked it. You don't deserve the title of Soul Reaper. Koga pulled his wrist forward to try and pull Hisuna towards him, but she merely retracted her whip and used Shunpo to appear in front of Koga, standing between him and Muramasa with Byakuya close behind. Who are you? He asked. Kukaki Hisuna, captain of Squad 3, Hisuna answered. Kukaki. Koga looked over at the man he had failed to take notice of earlier. That silvery white windflower scarf and those Kensecanes, 2 Kukaki captains, Koga chuckled. How interesting. Which one of you is the royal blood? Byakuya stepped forward. Hisuna is not a single step lower than me. However, if you are asking about which one of us is blood related to you, then that would be me, though I am disgusted to be so. Byakuya glared at Koga. Koga looked at Byakuya carefully. He grinned. You're not so Jun, but you resemble him immensely. Who are you? Kukaki Byakuya, captain of Squad 6 and the 28th leader of the Kukaki family. Byakuya stated. I see, so a great deal of time has passed since I was imprisoned. Bakudo 90, Shira Hitsuji. White coffin. Suddenly a large white box formed itself around Koga and he was sealed up inside it and bound by chains on the inside. Without the chant, it wouldn't last long with Hisuna down at 20% of her power, but it would be enough. Hisuna, what are you? Byakuya asked with a dumbfounded expression, only for Hisuna to walk over to him and slap him across the face. You kind of deserved that, Iin Tamashi quipped. How could you? Hisuna looked at the ground and then stared up at Byakuya, tears in her eyes. Why didn't you tell me about Koga? We've been married 56 years, Byakuya-sama. We have 2 darling children. How is it you never told me about this? Hisuna started to cry. Why couldn't you trust me? Why did you and Lelich arrange it so that I had to figure things out on my own? I nearly killed myself because I thought you betrayed me and killed our children. Do you two even think? Hisuna was practically squeaking as she spoke. Why couldn't you have come to me for help? Did you think I couldn't be of use to you? Haven't I been good to you all these years? I think I deserve better than this. Hisuna spoke right over her husband. I thought we were the unstoppable duo Kukaki and Kukaki Teiko. Help me understand, Byakuya-sama. Why couldn't I help you? Hisuna collapsed against her husband. What about me wouldn't let you trust me? Byakuya had an answer, but first he needed to calm Hisuna down. He wrapped his arms around her and then kissed her on the head. Don't be foolish, of course I trust you, but that's not why Lelich and I didn't tell you. When I went to him for help, we decided that it was best if we left you on the other side. The Godai needed a leader. We knew you would step up. Yuna would be conflicted once she learned of Lelich's alignment. Stefan needed to run the Onmitsukido and none of the senior captains would jump at the chance. You also already have experience leading when you were a phantom, so no matter how much it hurt me, we needed you to lead the Godai. I trusted you enough for that important task. Byakuya told her. And what about Kyo and Isao, why did you make it seem like you hurt our babies? Hisuna shivered. Byakuya hadn't the faintest idea, when Lelich first gave the order, why they did it. But with Hisuna standing here, he suddenly came to conclusion. He wanted to laugh. Sensei, your brilliance never ceases to amaze me. Byakuya spoke right into Hisona's ear with a genuine smile on his face. I think that Lelouch orchestrated that ploy so that you could be standing here right now, with me to help me. After all, as you said, we are the unstoppable duo Kukaki and Kukaki Teiko. Hisona clung to her husband harder. Byakuya-sama. Before the heartfelt moment could continue, Koga broke free from Hisona's Kido and he was more pissed off than before. You dare to make a fool of me? Koga grit his teeth. I'll kill you both. He then took notice of Iin Tamashi and found things to be a mite complicated. He looked down at Muramasa on the ground and grinned widely. Muramasa, if you still want me to believe that you aren't worthless, then go and fight that red-headed Zanpakuto over there. Why yes, sir. Muramasa got up only to lose his balance because of the wound in his stomach. Do I have to do everything? Koga sneered and healed Muramasa's wound with Kido. No go, you tool. Ignoring the fact that Koga was still treating him like crap, Muramasa glared at Iin Tamashi only for her to disappear. They came to another part of the lake where they were surrounded by coniferous trees. You were never on my side, were you? You and your master tricked me. You only wanted Koga released so Byakuya could kill him, Muramasa stated. Well duh, Iin Tamashi chuckled, floating off the ground, we're the good guys. My master and I just don't always play by the rules. We're not those lawful good shining white knights you're used to, but that's what makes us awesome. I felt your emotions when I released you. You and your master bicker all the time and yet here you stand so ready to fight for him, carrying out his every order like that silver-haired Soul Reaper. I don't understand. How is it you two act like that and yet he bears you no ill will at all? Why must I redeem myself in Koga's eyes and you are acting as if this is just another mad scheme your master has concocted? Haven't you ever heard of the phrase that love and hate are two sides of the same coin? Iin Tamashi asked. We fight all the time, but it's an extension of how much we really care for each other. And besides, it's how the person he modeled me after used to act towards him, so I simply replace the void she left behind when he died. Now it's my turn to ask you a question. This Zanpakuto rebellion, was that a wish you and your master shared with one another? Blood dripped from Muramasa's eyes. The Zanpakuto rebellion was simply a means to an end, Koga's release. In my future there is only Koga and me. Koga desired a new world for our prosperity. We simply wanted a place where we could belong. I warned Koga time and again about clinging to the past, but he wouldn't listen. Yet again someone's future destroyed by their desire for the past, Iin Tamashi chuckled, but returned to being serious. But enough chatter, if the rebellion was simply a means to an end, does that mean you had no intention of ever making it a reality, creating a truly harmonious world for the Zanpakuto and their Soul Reapers? No, Muramasa answered bluntly. My future is for Koga and me. You were all simply pawns in my plan, though it seems I miscalculated a great deal. However, Muramasa materialized his sword self, I will redeem myself. I see, Iin Tamashi was not happy with this answer. By the way, besides just the fact that we show our love and hate for each other as two sides of the same coin, there is another difference between your master and mine. And what's that? Muramasa asked with a dull stare. My master respects me, Iin Tamashi stated, he reminded me of that before he took me back. Your master sees Zanpakutos as tools, the Soul Reapers shape the Zanpakuto. My master knows the truth though. Without us, the Soul Reapers do not have the power to face the insurmountable odds that they do. Our power is formed by us and us alone, and we permit them to use it. Trust is formed by a synergistic bond between souls to create a powerful resonance. I've heard about what happened from Lelouch and Byakuya. I'm not surprised that this is where you now stand, as your master's carpet. I will make him understand, Muramasa stated, I will redeem myself. You can go ahead and try, Iin Tamashi stated and snapped her fingers to create a circle of fireballs that danced around her in a ring. Bring it. You're not going to just use geese? Muramasa asked. That would be too easy, besides I might need it for your master after you're dead, Iin Tamashi stated. You're not going to try and brainwash me again. I've been trying since we left Koga, if I could you would have turned already. That's why I asked about your bond to your master, Muramasa replied. Well, alright then, Iin Tamashi stated, tag you're it. She fired all of the fireballs at Muramasa simultaneously. The brown-haired spirit jumped out of the way, vanished and attempted to cut Iin Tamashi down from behind. Iin Tamashi produced a kite shield to block and then fired off several fireballs at Muramasa at point blank, but the blasts went right through him. An illusion? Iin Tamashi thought to herself, only for a sword to rip up her back. She teleported behind Muramasa and grabbed him by the shoulders before launching him into the air by throwing him. Eat this. She charged a gigantic fireball more than twice the size of Momo's during her Shikai and launched it at Muramasa. This time she got him and the spirit went crashing into the water. He re-emerged with no more than several singe marks and then opened his palm to grip Iin Tamashi in his multi-armed illusion attack. Iin Tamashi, expecting that she might have lowered her mental defenses, thinking perhaps Muramasa could sense something like that, merely put up her defenses only to be grabbed hold. I can't move. Now let's see if I can't force your submission, Muramasa stated as he gripped Iin Tamashi harder, causing her pain. Iin Tamashi looked down, seeing the reflection upon the water and noticing the several arms locking her down. What is that? She winced as she looked. Never mind, I don't have time to wonder. I can feel his breath upon my ear, fingers on my spine. I have to break free. Iin Tamashi's riot surged. Shokin Kinishi! She shouted in a pained yell. Suddenly the sky opened and a large anchor dropped into the water, distorting the image and cancelling the illusion. What's going on? So your technique is broken if the image is distorted? That's a bonus, Iin Tamashi smirked at her luck. Wait, so breaking my illusion wasn't your intention? Muramasa was panicked. If that giant anchor wasn't Iin Tamashi's purpose, then what was it? It was then that he saw the anchor retracting. You're about to see the fruition of my greatest technique. Kurosaki Ichigo and Ryujin Jako weren't the only beasts I've ever commanded. She lifted her arm up towards the sky. Rise. The large demon that was Iin Tamashi's greatest Bankai technique rose up from out of the lake. No, it wasn't the same this time. Rather than taking the form of the nightmarish fiend, this time the form was quite different. The creature's body was long and serpentine with a scissor blade-shaped tail tip. Its head was elongated like a dragon, but it had no wings and no arms. It did, however, have a pair of feathery fins towards the front of its body, and it had a black battleship-shaped crest along its head. The rest of its body was a dark violet and its underside was grape-colored. Its eyes were yellow. The creature was as big as Iin Tamashi's normal summon, but it was coiled up a bit so it was hard to tell. So the location of the summoning affects the type of creature that is summoned. This is my technique and I didn't even know that. I could share this with Lelich later, but maybe I'll make him learn it on his own. After all, there still are a few things he can't do with our Bankai just yet. Is that a Leviathan? Muramasa panicked. Scared. Iin Tamashi gave Muramasa her best troll face as she stood on top of the lake monster's crest. You should be. Attack. She commanded. The serpentine creature roared and tore towards Muramasa at surprisingly fast speeds for such a fast creature. Muramasa tried to get out of the way, but the creature turned its jaw sideways and clamped down upon Muramasa between its teeth. However, before it could close its mouth, Muramasa stabbed its lower jaw with his sword, causing the creature to lurch away and shake its now bleeding jaw. However, it had, like many other times the tactic had been pulled, served as a decoy, and Iin Tamashi leapt off the crest, causing the creature to disappear, and activated her telekinesis, grabbing hold of Muramasa and slung him into the water, holding him there for several moments, hoping he'd run out of oxygen, but she got bored and slung him out and smashed him into a tree. She then created a ring of dancing fireballs around her and stood in front of Muramasa. Had enough punishment? She asked. Muramasa simply faded like an illusion. Iin Tamashi teleported back over the water as Muramasa swung at her from behind. Sorry, I don't fall for the same trick twice. Fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Do you ever talk normally? Muramasa was finding her attitude annoying. Sorry, the sadistic streak was all an act, this is the real me, Iin Tamashi winked, although I would have faded your illusion after my attack. She said and sent her fireballs slamming towards Muramasa, but once again he faded. I should not have telegraphed that. Muramasa attacked her left flank this time, but Iin Tamashi protected herself with a barrier only to get cut in her right arm. What? She retreated away from Muramasa and found a plot of land to stand on. Does this mean there are no limits to his illusions? That means I can't take anything I see for granted. He's throwing off my perception, but is that all he can do? Are his illusions like Aizen's, or are they less complicated than that? Are they like Shinji's, but rather than reversing my perception it simply throws it off? Damn it, I can't act rashly. She sensed Muramasa attack her from behind and she teleported away. She created a ring of fireballs and sent them out in all directions. Upon not hitting anything but the nearby trees, she came to a conclusion. Okay, so there's a range limit to his attacks obviously. If he was like Aizen I would have been cut down the moment I landed here. If it were like Shinji, she prepped a fireball and then aimed up at the sky. Muramasa appeared and he dodged to the side. I see, so that's the trick. I know your game now. You won't get me again. Iin Tamashi chased after Muramasa. Shikumo. She created the death cloud as it began to cover the area in a widespread over the lake, covering it in a layer of thick black fog. Muramasa was now forced underneath the death cloud as it created a layer over the lake. Iin Tamashi had now separated the two of them as the thick cloud spread so that he was like a man trapped underneath a burning lake, if that were possible. However, Iin Tamashi specifically only covered the lake and, keeping an eye on Muramasa's Ryotsu, cornered him into a small portion of the forest. She made the death cloud circle around him, but gave him some breathing room. I seem to be safe here, Muramasa thought to himself. Got you, Iin Tamashi thought to herself and prepared a fireball that was very different from her usual ones. Ryoko Urisa Bakuden. Epidemic viral bomb. She fired forward. The blast had hit a tree, not even trying to hit Muramasa. Where is she aiming? Muramasa scoffed with a smirk. Iin Tamashi counted backwards in her head. Somebody cue the music, she said, and then snapped her fingers, and as if on cue the tree exploded with flecks of goo hitting more trees, and then those trees exploded, and then the explosive residue that hit those trees exploded as well, and then those trees exploded too, and so on and so on and so forth as Iin Tamashi watched the small forest go up like fireworks on the Chinese New Year. She dispelled the death cloud she had concocted and then went to go check up on Muramasa. She found him bleeding and burned on the ground thanks to her wonderful improvised minefield of exploding trees, and it seemed Muramasa had gotten some of the residue on him and parts of his own body had exploded as well, as he was missing several lumps of flesh. As he laid on the ground a bleeding, twisted mess, he looked at Iin Tamashi, who leered over him. He coughed as blood trickled from his eyes. You are truly remarkable, he said to Iin Tamashi. Shut up, you're dying. Why can't any of you people just go out into the night quietly? Whether or not you face death with dignity or not, can't you just not say anything at all? She looked across the lake, but appeared to be looking at no one in particular. I mean, really? Muramasa coughed again and looked at the redhead standing over him. Iin Tamashi, is there any chance, before I am gone, that you could use your geese on me, even if it is something mundane? Iin Tamashi turned her back on Muramasa. The power of geese is a great one. It is a power with a hefty responsibility attached. There was a time when my master did not recognize that responsibility. I trained him so that now the geese is a tool. It is a skill used to title the scales when nothing else will substitute. There was once a man in your position who desired the honor of being geesed with his dying breath. Much like him, you are not worthy of that honor. Muramasa's eyes closed. He could not hold them open any longer. My master was not very responsible with my power. He paused and coughed again. The pool of his own blood was now larger than the average rain-made puddle. Tell me, where does a Zanpakuto's soul go after death? Won't you just return to your master? Iin Tamashi asked. Koga has rejected me, Muramasa said hoarsely. Even if he hadn't, he is up against two captains, both of which have already fought back against my power once before. It would be difficult to do it again. Without a Bankai our chances would not have been high. I see. Iin Tamashi looked up at the moon that was beginning to rise in the sky. Then, if my master were here, he would probably say something like, Iin Tamashi did her best impression of Lelouch. A Zanpakuto is a part of its master's soul. A soul that dies is reincarnated. Therefore when the Zanpakuto and its master die they will become one, and when they die again the cycle begins anew and old partnerships are renewed or a new one is formed. Muramasa thought about that and a smile crept upon his face with regards to the idea of being at Koga's side one more time or with his reincarnation. Koga might not remember, but Muramasa would do his best to do so when Koga went back to the Soul Society. His tense palms opened up as his body began to lose the rest of its function from the loss of blood. I would like that future, Muramasa said and died. Iin Tamashi looked back at him and then looked at herself. Ah, she saw her body begin to fade into an orange light. She smiled. I see, without you to sustain the spell we all will return to our masters. The light reached up to her torso. It's as you planned, Lelich, the rest is in Byakuya and Hisona's hands now. She faded away completely. Soul Society. Amidst the fighting of the remaining Zanpakuto they all began to fade. All except one, Gonryomaru, however he ceased being hostile. Why are you not disappearing? Yolanda asked him. My master, I cannot sense him, Gonryomaru stated. What do you mean? Yolanda asked. His life signs, they are fading, Gonryomaru seemed sad. We did not even harm him that much when we attacked him, why is he dying? Seisaka Fukotaiko has had a high fever since he came to us. Perhaps he caught something, Yolanda stated. A fever? Gonryomaru asked. Yolanda nodded, that's what I've heard. I see, and from the feel of it, it seems he is not going to recover. He is, in immense pain it seems, Gonryomaru stated. Is there anything I can do? Yolanda asked. You're armed, aren't you? Gonryomaru asked her. Yolanda was surprised. I don't have the ability to inflict lethal self-damage even on purpose. If you kill me then the bond between my master and me will be severed. The Zanpakuto is born with its soul reaper and dies with its soul reaper. I shouldn't. It would be the same as murder, Yolanda stated. No, it's a mercy kill. I know my master, he would not want to suffer. Gonryomaru said, tossed aside his stick and threw out his arms. Please, kill me, let my master suffer no more. If that is what you believe is right then fine, but if I get in trouble, I'll haunt your reincarnation, Yolanda said and stuck the barrel of her shotgun at Gonryomaru's forehead. Thank you Bermuda-san, Gonryomaru smiled. Don't thank me for something like this. Seisaka Fukotaiko was a good man. I don't know how we'll replace him. Bang. In the 4th Division, Seisaka Fukotaiko's life signs flatlined, shocking those around him. Anohana, who had sensed the disturbance, walked up behind her subordinates. Someone please go and tell the head captain. I shall make arrangements for the funeral. Yes ma'am, the division members saluted. Anohana stood over Sasakaibe. In all the chaos we were unable to treat you properly. You were a good soldier to us these many, many years. To think that, of all casualties, the one we lost was someone who never picked up their weapon. Such a cruel, cruel irony. Captain is something the Isane started to say, but then saw the flattened life signs of Sasakaibe. He's gone. Yes, Anohana nodded. That's so unfair, we could have saved him after this mess was over, Isane complained. Sometimes these things happen, Isane. We are soldiers, people die. We cannot overly mourn the loss of our comrades, we can only do as we are instructed, give them a peaceful burial and memorial service and remember them. Yes, you're right, Isane nodded. Come, let us check up on Kano, Kiraku, and Yukatake, Anohana told her subordinate. Yes, Isane said. Anohana took Seisakabe's sheets and covered his face before she walked out of the room, reached inside to shut the light off, took one last look at the dead vice captain and then closed the door. End of chapter 104. Chapter 105, Kendra, Rukia, and Vera, Power Trio. Third-person POV. Byakuya and Hisona stood in front of Koga, the man having clashed with their sealed Zanpakuto for quite a bit now, at least until all three sensed the disturbance that was Muramasa's death. Koga merely scoffed the very fact. As I figured, I tell him to be useful and he goes and dies on me. What a worthless Zanpakuto. Koga broke his blade and picked up one of the axes used to seal him. Hisuna was beside herself. Betrayal? You treat your Zanpakuto like crap and he's the one that betrayed you. Quite a mouth on your mare, Kukaki Byakuya, Koga scoffed, and I'm the one who brought shame on the family. Byakuya simply scowled. When I was young I was taught by a very wise soul reaper that the world is always changing and that while the law will always be the law, the functions of the law are never stagnant. Sometimes it's okay to challenge the law even when it doesn't make sense. Sometimes the law can change for your benefit and for the benefit of others. Koga laughed. I thought the Kukakis set an example of tradition. And you're talking about change. Letting a woman speak her mind, be unsubmissive and take stand as a captain no less. You're going to lead the clan to ruin. I have no need to justify my choices to a man who brought shame upon the Kukaki family. I grow weary of this pointless banter. Byakuya turned his sword upside down. Bankai, Senbonzakura Kage Yoshi. The blades all surrounded Koga and while Byakuya's mere thoughts kept him busy he spoke to Hisuna. I'll take the forefront. Do you think you could prepare that technique you used against me that one time? Hisuna nodded. If you keep his attention I can use my more powerful songs and chants. Then do so. Byakuya tore into battle against Koga. Hisuna called out her whip and then whipped the air once in each direction before holding the leather taut as she held the whip over her head. Bankai, Saigo no Chu, no Kaze no Irako. Hisuna then began to sing her heart out to prepare her attack. While she sang Byakuya and Koga clashed. However, Byakuya soon learned of the extent of Koga's special power, the power that Jinrei had warned him of. However, Byakuya's focus did not wane and he immediately activated his Senkei to make sure that he could come in contact with Koga. With Senbonzakura's Ryutsu nullifying Koga's own there was no way his perception could be thrown off. Byakuya grabbed a blade from the rotating scene and he and Koga faced off. Rushing forward Byakuya took a wide sweep at the anorexic man. Koga sidestepped Byakuya and took a swipe as the right side of his abdomen before Byakuya leapt up onto the axe blade and slashed Koga over the head, but Koga dropped the blade and retreated back. Byakuya picked it up and threw it back at him, blunt end facing Koga. You know the sharp end's the more effective one. I don't like facing an opponent who is not armed. There's no honor in that kind of battle, Byakuya stated. I don't need your goddamn respect. Koga charged at Byakuya quickly, but Byakuya sidestepped and hacked at Koga with his blade in his left hand. It was days like this Byakuya knew it paid to be ambidextrous. His opponent took a slash to the back right side of his abdomen and straight through the back. Koga performed a wide 270-degree arcade sweep, but Byakuya was already far away from him. Hado 4, Byakurai, Byakuya blasted the pale white lightning at the man who brought shame upon his family. Koga bashed away the Kido with the axe he was wielding, but the Kido only meant to serve as an opening so Byakuya could close the gap between him and Koga safely. He cut wide across Koga's back, but was blocked as Koga swept down low and pivoted and brought the axe underneath Byakuya's blade. I gotta say, you're pretty strong. There aren't many in the Kukaki family that were as strong as you. I was gonna ask you before, but that Amazon of a wife of yours cut me off. Did Jinrei finally kick the bucket yet? Byakuya vanished and appeared behind Koga. A slash mark appeared several seconds later up his torso at a diagonal and reached his left shoulder. You will never utter that man's name in my presence, Byakuya said with biting irritation, though it was hard to tell from his tone since he was always so serious. Following that slash another slash appeared from Koga's left shoulder that went down his back towards his right hip. Byakuya looked over his shoulder at Koga. And that is the last time you insult my wife. Hisuna is a Yamato Nadeshiko. She's no shrinking violet, but a strong leader requires an ally that can always be at his side, someone who compliments him well and always has his back, man or woman. Hisuna is the partner I have chosen and so help me if you insult her again I will mutilate your body after I have killed you. Koga laughed, oh you're definitely the best challenge I've ever had. Look at you, sticking up for your woman and saying such noble things making pretty speeches about how teamwork and honor mean so much. It's all bullshit. Koga charged and swung down, fiercely with the axe he was wielding. Byakuya blocked with a bored expression, but Koga snapped the blade in half and brought the axe blade straight into Byakuya's gut. Byakuya retreated before the axe could slice into his organs and summoned another sword. I suppose I shouldn't try to preach about honor and teamwork to a man who clearly has neither of both and will never admit to his own overbearing arrogance to see the true reasons behind his downfall, Byakuya mocked. You brat. With an enraged yell, Koga dashed towards Byakuya, taking several fierce swings at the Kukaki head. Byakuya dodged each one with a burst of shunpo and then struck forward and slashed Koga up the side of his right shoulder. Koga didn't take time to flinch, turned on a dime, stuck the tip of the axe into the ground, hoisted himself up and over it and then swung it down over its head and used the Ryotsu to temporarily stun Byakuya before attacking him across his chest line, creating a nice gash. With both hands on the blade, Byakuya burst forth and pivoted as he neared Koga, ducking underneath the horizontal strike he figured wound come and took a crouching blow at Koga's ankle. The crippling strike caused Koga to lose his balance and Byakuya pivoted on his feet, sprouted to full height and with his fist decked Koga right in the jaw. The impact was excruciatingly painful. With all of his femininity, most would expect Byakuya to, as the saying goes, hit like a girl. Byakuya however did hit like a girl, if that girl happened to be Feng Shaolin or Shihoin Yoryuki, that is. Koga was pushed back by the impact and spat out 2 teeth. His jaw bleeding, he raced towards Byakuya yet again, but he was far away enough that Byakuya retreated towards the back of his Senkai. He perked up his ears. He had gotten far away enough from Hisuna so that Koga would have a hard time hearing her attack, but he could do so if he positioned himself right. He wanted to make sure Koga took the full brunt of the attack and he had ample room and time to dodge. What just spacing out for? Koga took a fierce swing at Byakuya, but the man lurched to the side and took a decapitating swing at Koga. The axe-wielding fallen noble blocked. You know, for all of your wife's barking, I don't see her anywhere. Or are you so honorable that you want to fight me alone? I thought this was going to be 2-on-1. I wouldn't expect someone who constantly fights by himself to understand the concept of teamwork, Byakuya scoffed. However, Hisuna is no slouch. Perhaps in another timeline, where you are not so overly confident in your abilities, perhaps you could have seen that power for yourself. Koga retracted his blade and took a swing at Byakuya. With both hands on the blade, Byakuya positioned his legs in an L shape and held his blade upside down with his arms arcing over his head. Please, the only scary woman in the Soul Society is Anohana. Byakuya pivoted around Koga and hacked off a piece of his right shoulder blade, flipped his sword and stabbed it into Koga's back and left it there. Then he snapped his fingers and 12 swords from the walls went zipping towards Koga. 2 dug into his feet, pinning him in place, 2 more into his kneecaps reducing his mobility, and 8, 4 on each side, into his torso. I warned you before that if you insulted Hisuna again that I would mutilate your body after death. Unfortunately it seems that threat is going to be a bit premature, Byakuya said, and could hear Hisuna reaching the high note in her chant before she unleashed it. Senbonzakura Kage Yoshi dispersed back into its billions of blades. I also said that perhaps you might have had a chance to see Hisuna's power if things had been different, but I'll let you off with a glimpse of the power you continuously mocked, Byakuya said as he wrapped himself up in his own blades to keep himself protected and cover his escape. Before Byakuya disappeared, the last thing Koga saw was a very wide grin on Byakuya's face that made it look like the noble captain had spent far too much time around Ichimaru Jin. The wise fighter always disguises his true attack plan. Koga was confused when Byakuya disappeared, only to see a bright flash of light headed straight towards him. He turned his head and saw Hisuna's shadow as the moon glowed fiercely behind her, and a bright whitish blue beam, several times larger and more powerful than a Zero, rocketed towards him. Oh, you insufferable bastard! Koga shouted at the top of his lungs, only to get completely torn apart by Hisuna's chant of light. There was nothing left after the light barreled towards him. Hisuna and Byakuya both powered down and embraced one another. That was brilliant, Hisuna, Byakuya complimented. Puns from you, you must be in a good mood, she chuckled. Koga is defeated and I no longer have to pretend I am your enemy. I am in a very good mood, he answered. Hisuna laid her head on Byakuya's chest and spoke solemnly. Please, if there are any more secrets like Koga within the Kukaki family, please tell me. It was hard doing this. I can act, you know. I understand, from now on I'll always have you at my side, Hisuna. Byakuya-sama, Hisuna simply smiled. 5 days later. Soul Society. Tatsuki would be finishing up her recovery and be good to go home in the evening. If not for her, Ichigo would have packed his and Orium's things and left for home immediately. He also got a physical by Anohana, voluntarily, to see if anything could be done about his hollow, give the Soul Society some more information to work with. He also, to keep his boredom down, actually helped Kenpeka get back in shape through physical therapy. Since Anohana wouldn't let the crazed captain go all out, Ichigo felt that fighting him would be safe. He respected Kenpeki after all. There was no harm in helping him get back in shape so long as he didn't have to worry about getting pummeled into the ground. However, while things were pretty good for Ichigo, they were about the opposite for Lelouch. After his and Byakuya's explanation had been spread around the Siraitai, a discussion, not a trial, was set up to discuss the political plausibility of the House of Lamperouge. On top of that, Yuna whacked him on the head for being such a dumbass and going as far as he did. Good intentions or not, the fact remained that he had still used Kurohitsuji on her. However, she did give him a peck on the cheek after the fact for being the brilliant genius she always knew him to be. Hisuna also chastised Lelouch, especially for what he made her believe about her godchildren. Lelouch had more hell from her than he had from Yuna. The discussion Lelouch was to have with Central 46 was not because he was being charged with any sort of crime. In fact, for what it was worth, Lelouch was completely off the hook as far as doing time was concerned. He had followed all the rules that Yamamoto gave him whenever Lelouch needed to go off the radar or pull something of this nature. At least one captain had to be aware of his true intentions, Byakuya in this case, and the use of geese was also relayed to Byakuya, and since the only casualty of the war, Sasakaibe, was not a direct cause of Lelouch's actions, he, Byakuya, and Susanna, who despite not knowing that she wasn't betraying the Soul Society at first was also being let off with a warning. And Yuna believed the paperwork she had been piling up was punishment enough, were let free to go. Lelouch stood in front of the assembled wise men to discuss politics. Unlike the criminal law system, the Central 46 still had decision-making power in nobility and acts of the nobles, especially the establishment of a new house. Lelouch admitted to acting of his own free will and that Byakuya had not coerced him, nor did his ties to the Kukaki family do the same. While Lelouch was not being prosecuted for any of his actions, the fact remained that he had helped facilitate terrorism and attacked a captain, Yuna. Criminally he was not responsible. As a man looking to start a noble house, this was another matter entirely. So you admit to your transgressions and, given your track record, you admit that things like this could continue to happen. I'm sorry, Captain Lamperouge, but that's just not acceptable for a noble clan founder, the Central 46 told him. I understand, I knew the risk going in and I took it anyway. If this is going to have you bar me from being able to rank amongst the nobility, then that's the price I'll pay. I'd rather be free and do justice than sit behind red tape and watch things explode in front of me. Lelouch was actually smiling. The members nodded to each other and noted that Lelouch was taking the matter well, so they agreed that they could take the next matter into account. Very well, given that the land construct for the House of Lamperouge has already been built, though it is not a noble facility, it is still your land to do with what you please, given that it was donated to you by the Kukaki and Shiba houses. Many Soul Reapers had homes within the Siraitai outside their offices, not just the nobles. Many even had families in Rokanga that they visited periodically with gifts and kin to help them get by. Lelouch knew, of course, what he wanted to do with the land he owned. Then, if that's the case, I'd like the house itself to be donated to the surviving members of the Atremere clan, namely Atremere Senna and Atremere Kiskamot, Lelouch stated. They deserve a new home. However, I'd like the shelter that was built to remain as such for strays and those who have nowhere else to go if they are discharged or unable to become Soul Reapers. That is quite unusual. The Central 46 was perplexed by Lelouch's decision. There still remains the matter of the other facilities within the home, like the chess set, the observatory and the laboratory. If at all possible, I'd like the Kido Corps to have a temporary ban lifted on temporal displacement Kido and have those buildings added as part of the Department of Research and Development. If there is any money left over that needs to be refunded, send me an invoice and I'll pay the Kukaks and the Shibas in full. I am perplexed, Captain, one of the members spoke up. You're giving this fine villa away. Those who are strong have no need to boast their strength. I do not need a fancy living environment to prove what I am. My inner strength and the strength of inspiration given to me by those who trust me is all I need. While I truly did wish to use the House of Lamperouge to its fullest, I realize now, as a cause of my actions and any future actions I may take, that I am truly not cut out to be a noble, Lelich stated. Then if that is your will, the lead judge said from the top of the stairs, since all of your requests are reasonable, so let it be written, so let it be done. Council dismissed. When Una received word of what Lelich had done, she rushed over to the House of Lamperouge. She was intrigued by Lelich's selflessness, especially since he was giving power back to those he had cut down once before. She was perplexed. She asked if Susanna wanted to follow, but, as expected of the Silverette, she knew that Lelich knew what he was doing. Una arrived on scene and observed Lelich talking to an older woman with short silver hair in a bob cut, a face that was starting to wrinkle and dark brown eyes. She was hunched over on a large stick and wearing a dirt brown cloak around the white garments she was wearing. Standing next to her was a girl who looked to be in her teens, but was much older, with short strawberry blonde hair and amber eyes. She was dressed in an orange leotard with brown shorts over it and wearing sandals without socks. Lelich appeared to be holding something in his hand, a locket of some sort. I am sorry for what happened to your son. I never meant for you and he to get caught up in your husband's mess, Lelich told Kiskamit. Kiskamit put her old wrinkling hands around Lelich's right one. You're not the one to blame, Lamperouge Teiko. It is that man Zero that did all the damage, and Eisen. Do not blame yourself. I still orchestrated his death at the battle. You know that we could have tried to save him, Lelich responded solemnly. Then why didn't you? Senna snapped. If you thought he was savable, why didn't you try? I don't think he wanted to be saved, Lelich said, removing his hand from Kiskamit's feeble grip and opened the locket. However, a Tremere Kiskamit-sama, Lelich showed her the inscription, your son loved you, and you Senna. He believed that what he was doing was for the pure and good of your family. And, Lelich flipped the locket to its other compartment with his index finger, he seemed to be happy. Senna held her hands out to receive the locket from Lelich. He dropped it in her hands, chain and all. Nii-san, she held the locket tightly to her. Oh, for goodness sakes, Kiskamit smiled at the picture of Mia and Talbumasuk, that boy. If there's anything I can do, to help you and your daughter rebuild, please let me know, Lelich told them. Of course, thank you Lamperouge Teiko. We are, in your debt. I am glad you appeared before us. This means so much to Senna and me. We were going to take refuge in your shelter when it opened. We will keep it well cleaned and well fed. I will rebuild the clan, and Senna, you had best start thinking about who you are going to marry. This clan needs money after all, and I'm not getting any younger, Kiskamit told her. Mom, Senna flushed. Lelich smirked, well, perhaps you'd like to enroll as a Soul Reaper, Senna. The work pays well even if all you're doing is pushing paperwork around. Of course, since you're not a noble, you'll have to go through the tests and everything like a normal student. I think you could honor your brother that way. I remember what color my blood is. I could pull strings, get you the best teachers, make it so that you're given all the opportunities you can. I won't exempt you from anything, but I'll try to see what I can do. It's the least I can do, for taking your brother's life. You should do it, Senna. Most clan heads are Soul Reapers. You would make a fine Soul Reaper. You don't have to push me, mother. Senna looked down at the ground with a smile. I was already thinking of doing it, for Nii-san. Then I'll notify the academy and have you ready to go next academy year, Lelich said. Now if you'll excuse me, there's some paperwork with my name on it back at my office. Of course, we shouldn't keep you for too long, Kiskamit bowed her head. You take care now. Lelich smiled and waved and walked away, right up to Una. What are you doing here? He asked her in surprise. I was curious, she folded her arms. It seemed uncharacteristic of you to be so charitable to former enemies. Lelich scowled. I destroyed the Tremere clan and all of its guards because of Retin. I never meant for Talbumasuk and his family to get caught in the crossfire. Tremere Talbumasuk was an aspiring young Soul Reaper. If he had worked hard instead of pushing himself, he might be with us on our side. I don't blame him for the war, I blame Eisen. That man has poisoned more minds and defiled more souls than I care to count. Well, he's gone now, like you always say, let's not dwell on the past, Una told him. Lelich nodded and was suddenly given a peck on the cheek from Una. What's that for? For being the man I've always known you to be, Yuna smiled at him. Lelich simply smiled. Have you thought about what this means for you, me, Susanna and Nemir yet? She asked. Isane's dropped out of the race for now, she said to tell you that Anohana needs her. I see. I haven't exactly figured it out yet, but I'm sure I'll figure it out, Lelich said. Then as long as I have you to myself at the moment, Yuna tip-tapped her fingers along the back of Lelich's shoulders, what do you say you and I spend some quality time together in the shelter? No one's there, right? Having sex in a public place where anyone can just walk in. Lelich chuckled, I thought Nemir was the sexual deviant. Yuna smirked and stood behind Lelich, leaning against him. Oh come on, you're telling me it's just one big room. I know you better than that. I don't think I deserve to be rewarded after what I did, Lelich said with a smirk on his face. Who says you're getting a reward? I am the hunter and you are my prey, Yuna said and nibbled playfully for a moment on Lelich's neck. Lelich looked up at the setting sun. Well, why not? It'll be a little bit longer before Ichigo ships out. We can finish before then. Yay, good answer, Yuna said and dragged Lelich away. 2100 hours that evening. Yuna, Lelich, Kyokaku, Rangiku, Kayan, Vera, Rukia, Hisuna, and Yukitake were all gathered around the Senkaimon to see Ichigo and Tatsuki off. You take care of yourself, Ichigo, Rukia told him. You know I will, Ichigo said, hugging his cousin goodbye. Rukia walked back by the others. Stay out of trouble, Ichigo told Lelich. Lelich broke out into a grin and chuckled. Worry more about yourself and just try to complete high school without any problems. Don't worry, Tatsuki slapped her hand on Ichigo's shoulder and rubbed it, I'll shove his face in front of his textbooks if I have to. Well, that's good, a voice not belonging to anyone currently assembled said kindly. Ichigo and the others all turned towards Ichigo's left and saw Kendra standing tall on top of a nearby pillar. It's always nice to have someone you can rely on to have your back. Oh, Kendra-san, Ichigo was a little surprised to see her. From what he had been taught by Lelich, the second division normally kept to themselves and weren't the most social of Soul Reapers. He smiled warmly at her nonetheless. What are you doing here? I came to see you off, is that a problem? Kendra snarked. Nah, Ichigo responded. It is odd that you came all the way out here though, Kendra. I thought for sure you'd be leading the patrol corps after the several Soul Reapers whose Zanpakuto killed them, Yukitake responded. Naomi's taking up the slack work for the moment, Kendra said and then looked straight at Ichigo. Besides, I have a habit of always staying on good terms with my comrades. Ichigo smirked, knowing that he now had a friend in Kendra. You take care of yourself too then, you hear? I always do, Kendra responded back. Tatsuki looked at her watch. Ichigo, we should get going, your sister's curfew is in 15 minutes. Aw crap, Dad's gonna grill me if Yuzu's been crying, Ichigo rubbed his neck. He headed off into the Senkaimon and gave a two-finger salute as he left. Tatsuki followed suit behind him and then looked at Kendra with a glare. I've got my eye on you, she told the lieutenant. I haven't the faintest idea what you're implying, Kendra responded with a serious stare. Whatever, Tatsuki said and disappeared into the Senkaimon. The gate closed and the area became dark, lit only by moonlight. Well, he's gone, again, Rukia said, watching her cousin go. And you know what that means, right? It's party time. Kyokaku exclaimed. I hear that. Rangiku high-fived her. The two women ran off. Oh, for the love of creation, not again. Kayan ran after his sister and her lieutenant. Well, I suppose I should head back to Division 2 then, lots of paperwork with my name on it, and I need to relieve Naomi of temporary command of my forces, Kendra stretched. You might want to hold off on that, Kendra, Lelich said, I want you, Rukia and Vera in my office stat. Okay, the leader of the patrol corps stated, slightly confused. In Lelich's office the three women stood around and Lelich sat calmly at his desk. Lelich Teiko, is there something wrong? Rukia asked. Well, not wrong per se, but something that needs to be taken care of, Lelich answered. Elaborate, Kendra folded her arms. Before this mess started, Head Captain Yamamoto called me into his office. He wanted to talk to me about a well-kept secret in the Soul Society, a man by the name of Jinjo Kyujo, Lelouch stated. That name rings a lot of bells, Kendra said seriously. It should for someone of your rank in the 2nd Division, Lelouch stated. He was the first substitute Soul Reaper, Lelouch stated, the only other one in fact besides Ichigo that went on to become a full-fledged Soul Reaper and regain his powers after they were taken away to help out his donor, who was in a position similar to yours Rukia, Taka Natsumi, a former seated officer of Division 10. As it currently stands, STRU just reported back a notification status on Jinjo's whereabouts, Karakura town. Rukia and Kendra were both surprised. Lelouch continued, the head captain not only wants Jinjo out of the picture, but he's also asked that Ichigo's loyalties be tested as well. I see, and that's where I come in, I suppose, Rukia stated. Lelouch nodded, Kendra, you're head of patrol troops. You're the scout and the lead combatant in the case of locating Jinjo. Rukia, your job is to keep Ichigo at bay, watch him, make sure he doesn't do anything stupid and, ultimately, tell him nothing about what's going on, Lelouch said. I'll do my best, Kendra crossed her arm over her chest. Understood, sir, Rukia nodded. Lelouch looked at Vera, Vera, you're my communicant. So to make sure that those two can do their jobs, you're going to report back to me all relevant information and act to exactly what I tell you, got it? Vera simply saluted. Good, you three are dismissed. Oh, this is gonna be great. Rukia stretched with a smile on her face as the three women began to leave the division. We get to go planet side. Who? Someone's excited about this, Kendra chuckled. Well, I like being in the world of the living, Rukia pushed her fingers together, it's fun. You're such a child on the inside, Kendra laughed to herself. You two are of the same division, so I'll meet you at your Senkaimon. Rukia nodded, very well. By then, Kendra took off. Holy crap, she's quick, Rukia noted. Of course, what the girls didn't know was that it would be a while before they would actually get a handle on Kyujo Jinjo, and fate had a surprise in store for them that would last a while before they could even make any progress on their mission. Hell. Mount Lucifer. In the 8th circle of Hell, the base of the tallest mountain in the 9 circles of Hell, that stretched up through to the very top, but only accessible by the 8th and 4th circles, Mount Lucifer, stood. The mountain was shaped like a volcano made of brimstone covered in soot and ash with demonic black crystal jutting up from the ground. The mountain stood a massive 8 kilometers tall, and in the center of the mountain was a spire that stood along the flat surface of the top of the sloped mountain that stretched even higher into the air, making the entire structure 12 kilometers in height. Standing in front of the spire, at the top of the mountain, were two people. One individual, a visitor of the mountain, was a male Togabito by the name of Kokyuto. He was wrapped in black bandages upon his head, neck, and around his right eye. The other was an individual in a beige cloak wrapped around their person, obscuring their appearance from the waist up, but a squirrel tail could be seen sticking out of the back of the cloak. From beneath the cloak the person spoke to Kokyuto in a deep, booming voice. Kokyuto, for what reason have you sought me out? The squirrel-tailed individual asked him. Rita-sama, I bring news to you that I know you would want to hear. 5 Togabito, Shurin, Taken, Garagai, Gunjo, and Murakumo are planning on escaping your ladyship's grasp. I, for the salvation of a part of my soul, would like to assist in their capture, Kokyuto told her. Rita looked at Kokyuto as he knelt down on one knee in front of her. Kokyuto was one of the stronger Togabito in Hell, one of the top 200. His sentence was heavy, 500 years. He was incarcerated for murders against other people for the murder of his sister. This was 130 years ago. Rita studied the man beneath her and she decided to grant him the chance he desired. Very well, she said and pulled down her hood, revealing her face. Since the last time she had seen Anohana, Rita hadn't seemed to have aged a single day. She looked as youthful as ever. There was not a gray hair in sight, no wrinkles upon her face. Rita pushed the folds of her cloak away from her arms and over her shoulders. She snapped her fingers and her staff appeared in her hand. She held it in front of Kokyuto, the tip of the triangle pointing at him, the rings sagging towards the ground. I will grant you this chance at salvation, Kokyuto. However, I hope you know what will happen if you choose to betray my trust. Fear not, my lady, Kokuto said with a sly smirk. I know. Very well, Rita said. She pulled her staff away from Kokuto's face and levitated her staff in front of her and clapped her hands in front of her. The staff gave off a bright light and Rita closed her eyes as she chanted. In the name of the Father, by the powers invested in she who controls the 9 circles, my voice cries out to the sky. This sinner before me, Shapen Kokuto, I grant thee, one temporary, monitored passage out of hell to aid my kind against the forces that would do them great harm to stop the sinner Kenzo Shuren. So let it be written. Rita opened her eyes, so let it be done. Rita spread her hands apart and her staff slammed into the ground. Kokuto could feel his body becoming lighter as the chains that bound him no longer felt heavy. He flexed his hand. Rita then snapped her fingers and the door to her spire opened. Make yourself at home, Kokuto, she told him. When the time comes I will send you to stop the invasion. Thank you, Rita-sama, Kokuto praised and went inside. As he took the lift below ground he smirked. Wow, that was easier than I thought. Sucker. Rita had no idea of the chain of events she had just unleashed. To be continued. Check the description for the links to the author.